Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's BI Livecast series. My name is Annie Fay. I am our Senior Director of Content and Community here at Brand Innovators, and I'm so excited that you decided to join us today for a really awesome lineup of speakers. So we're going to be talking all about consumer engagement, marketing leaders from LoopMe, Digitas, Future Proof, Beatbox Beverages, Reckitt, Kimberly Clark, Current, and many, many more are going to be joining us today. So please make sure to ask questions and use the chat function to engage both with our speakers and attendees. So without further ado, I am very excited to introduce our very first panel of the day. So please welcome to the stage Zoe Soon, who's the VP of Experience Center for IAB, Christina Park, VP of North America Enterprise Sales at LoopMe, Keith Solyachech, the VP and GD of Experiential Technology at Digitas North America, and they will be moderated by Tony Parisi, Head of XR Experience and Innovation at Unity. Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
Hi, Annie.
Morning there, Annie.
Thank you so much for joining us. All right, so I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to Tony if you guys want to do some intros, and my colleague Ariel will be back to host the rest of the day, so you'll see her pop in right at the end of your session.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Annie. Welcome to Consumer Engagement Day, Brand Innovators, and our first panel on collaborative advertising, how AR gives ads new purpose. A lot of you have been hearing about XR, augmented virtual, and mixed reality. They're revolutionizing storytelling and how brands connect with consumers. And this journey is becoming much more collaborative, an interaction between the creator, the agency, the brand, and the consumer. And that's what we're going to drill down into today, in an increasingly immersive and self-directed world of new media. Now, for us to fully realize these opportunities, we need to kind of unpack and understand where we are with the technology, with the state of content creation, where this plays in media. And so with this great panel of experts we have today, these are thought leaders, these are technology leaders, these are folks who are on the ground actually making the stuff happen on a day-to-day basis too. We're going to explore all this. So we're going to introduce ourselves first, and then we're going to get into the meat of the panel. I'm Tony Parisi, Head of AR and VR Ads and E-commerce at Unity. Unity is the leading platform for creating real-time 3D content and operating businesses based on that 3D content. We were forged in the game industry, but for the last 5+ years, people have been using our tech to create experiences and applications in a range of industries, including automotive, media and entertainment, and most notably brand advertising, which is what we're here to talk to you about today. We also have an advertising platform in-game that helps our game publishers monetize, that has significant reach. Over 2 billion consumers are reached by our ads platform monthly, hundreds of millions of daily impressions, and so on. So we can unpack all of that and how all these technologies and everything work together later. But without further ado, I would love our panelists to introduce ourselves. And we're going to start with Christina Park at LoopMe. Good to see you, Christina.
Hi, good to see you. So hi, my name is Christina. I'm the VP of North America Enterprise Sales here at LoopMe. LoopMe is a leading outcome-based platform that focuses on driving measurable uplift against business outcomes like brand lift, offline sales, in-store visits, along with online sales and conversions in real time. We've been in business for about 9 years, and we have a strategic partnership with Unity.
Thank you, Christina. Let's turn it over to Keith Solyachech at Digitas. Take it away.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me. Yes, my name's Keith Solyachech. I'm a VP Group Director of Experiential Technology at Digitas. And at Digitas, we firmly believe that being the connected marketing agency is the best way to connect with consumers, find those pivotal moments, and activate in the right medium channel with the right creative at the right time. And increasingly so, we're finding that XR is the way to connect with consumers in a way they want to connect. And so myself, leading the XR practice at Digitas, as you mentioned, we've been in the weeds and in the trenches building these XR experiences for brands, experimenting, testing, learning what works, what connects with consumers, and growing that practice, as we go.
And finally, Zoe Soon from the IAB.
Thanks, Tony.
Hi,
Hi.
Zoe.
Hi, I'm Zoe Soon, Vice President of the Experience Center at IAB. The IAB is an industry trade organization that helps develop standards, conducts research, provides legal support for the online advertising industry. I head up the Experience Center, where we're focused on emerging platforms and evolving consumer behavior to help the industry future-proof. So specifically AR, games and esports, and voice and digital assistants.
So this is so exciting to me personally because I speak to each one of these panelists at least on a weekly, if not a daily basis. We collaborate on a lot of different things together. This is the first time we've all been on a panel together though. And this topic is of such import and weight that I can't wait to get into it. So enough with, let's dispense with the preliminaries and let's get right into it. We thought we would frame this conversation today by doing a little myth busting. I think there's probably a lot of folks in the audience who are not quite clear on what's going on with VR, AR, all these cool nifty technologies. Maybe you've heard the buzzwords, maybe you've experimented a little bit, but you're not quite sure what the state of play is. So let's start by drilling into some of those. And we're gonna take 4 myths on here. And the first one is that AR, VR, mixed reality are just a fad. They're the bright and shiny thing that everyone's excited about or has been for the last 3 or 4 years, but is not going to be here to stay. The next one is that it's hard and expensive to produce. And we're going to really drill into that and what it takes these days. You don't need a Hollywood production budget. I mean, sometimes you do depending on what you're making, but certainly not for marketing content. Third myth is that it's only for certain verticals. That, you know, it'd be really good for entertainment, for example, but I'm not sure what you could do, say, with a CPG brand. So we're going to dig into that. And finally, and maybe most importantly to this audience, that the ROI is questionable. We don't know how to measure this, that, you know, this is sort of, again, it partly comes back to expense and all that. But that even when you've gone through the expense, we don't know what the results are and whether it was worth it or not. So let's tear into it. And I want to start with the novelty thing. And I want to start with you, Christina, because LoopMe just shared with us that they've done a consumer survey or a customer survey really recently. And talk to us about that and maybe other things related to this idea that it's a fad and it's not here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. So last week through our proprietary survey technology that we call Audience Intelligence, we surveyed over 2,300 Americans and asked them about the value of immersive advertising experiences. And it was pretty interesting, the things that they had to say. So nearly 20% of those respondents said that they were more likely to pay attention to an interactive ad. 2/3 of those people said that they remember seeing an ad while playing games on their mobile device. 1/4 of those respondents said that their attitudes of ads would improve if they were more engaging. And almost 40% of respondents said that they might find it useful to use a virtual look or first look product kind of experience at home. And I think overall what we saw is there's a huge opportunity out there for brands to reach consumers, I think, in a much more meaningful way, leveraging formats like AR and VR.
Wow, that's great. That's pretty significant. I think, Keith, you may have actually had a compliment to this where you're saying people are really asking for it. You believe the demand is there and it's pent up. So, I mean, that might go hand in glove with this consumer sentiment that Christina was just pointing out.
That's right. That's right. Not only are we activating these AR campaigns, but yes, the consumer demands them. And we've tipped over in the last year, and certainly the pandemic has accelerated that, to the majority of consumers do prefer brands that offer AR shopping experiences or AR immersive experiences. And really, you know, this is born out of the fact that, you know, the consumers want to put themselves in the middle of these brand experiences, and that's intriguing to them. It connects with them. It gives them a chance to personalize what they're shopping for and really build confidence. And that's key here is building confidence in, you know, their purchase or their brand experience.
Wow. Okay, Zoe, do you want to amp that as well? Because IAB has been involved in some studies. Has been getting some really interesting data on this as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think ever since Google and Apple equipped phones with AR-ready software, it's becoming increasingly a part of consumers' daily lives. I think we're projected to reach 85 million users in the US alone this year. I think what we're seeing is marketers haven't quite worked out how to leverage this new capability. My dad thought the internet was a fad. Everything starts out as a fad, but the forward-looking brands, we're seeing that change, which is why we started the AR board, which Keith and Tony are a part of. 97% of the brands on the Forbes most valuable brands list have or are currently engaging in AR campaigns. So I think people are thinking it's a fad, but it's just people haven't leveraged it yet.
That's another awesome stat. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully we will have a through line here where we come back and have even more interesting stories and statistics around this to support this idea that maybe we are moving beyond the novelty phase of this to real actionable here. But let's move on because we have 3 other myths I want to tackle before we jump into some other topics. Next one is, again, and it's too hard to produce, that this is like Hollywood budget stuff. If I want to make an interactive, immersive experience, I'm going to need to hire James Cameron or someone like that to create that for me. And it's going to take a year, and it's going to be like building a video game, which can be complex even with the simplest of tools. Keith, why don't you start us off with this one? Like, what's your point of view on that?
Yeah, Tony, just like any other ad format, some of your traditional ad formats, television, there's levels. And there's levels that you can tap into to right size your AR brand experience solution. Whether you want, a rather simple virtual try-on, on one of the social platforms, utilizing some of your existing assets, that's on the lower complexity side. Maybe you want to really go out and tap into some of those Hollywood production budgets that you talked about, Tony. And really, your imagination is your only limitation with AR. So what it really is going to come down to is what either that ROI or ROAS is going to be that you're trying to achieve with the campaign, finding a right solution, finding a way to test, something that you'd like to disrupt that you're already doing and improve upon. Find that business challenge you have and tap into AR to solve it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those social platforms. As Zoe and I know through our conversations with this AR board at the IAB, the social platforms have mentioned the creative costs can be just single-digit thousands of dollars. It does not have to be a massive spend on the production side of this to try something for a simple try-on or one of these little nuggets of AR that is delivered through the social platform. Now, of course, going along with that, it's maybe a sort of modest investment in ad spend. I mean, there's the creative, but then there's how much you buy in the media to actually have an effective and testable campaign. But that
and credit to the Unity team. Credit to the Unity team. You guys have led the way in content creation in the XR space, and Tony, we've been working on this for a few years, and really putting the game engine in the hands of creators, both big and small, production shops, both big and small, has expanded the capability. And then, moving into even these low code platforms to build XR experiences. Again, we can tap into such a boundless opportunity in creating these. And really, brands, they just have to tap into some of the assets they already have to go bring these to life.
Yeah, that's great, Keith, and thanks for bringing it up. And not to be too self-serving around Unity, but I mean, at least we should talk about the trend in how these new game engine technologies are making it. We're democratizing the 3D content creation process. That was certainly Unity's mission going into video gaming 15 years ago when the company started. And we're seeing lots and lots of low-cost options and low total cost of ownership options for creating the content. So that's a really good point as well. I want to move back because we still got 2 more myths to dive into here. Here's my favorite of these myths. It's only for certain verticals. It's really only for entertainment, dancing characters, Spider-Man jumping around in your space, which is awesome, by the way, that virtual Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse campaign that was launched last year with 8th Wall. Zoe, what do you think about that? And what are you seeing from the IAB's purview and some of the brands and kind of vertical experiences that are being created?
Yeah, it's definitely not just for entertainment. I think if last year taught us anything in that socially distanced shopping world, AR really bridged an important gap for brands and consumers, allowing them to safely try on makeup. So it did really well in beauty, fashion, We also seeing AR do really well in the auto vertical. So car enthusiasts love being able to see cars in 3D without going to the showroom. They can even test drive it. Home, Wayfair launched an impressive app where you can put furniture into your physical space, and they've seen propensity to buy increase by 11 times and return rates decrease. Like, how many times have you bought something and it just doesn't work in your space?
Remember that stat in a second, because we're going to come back to the fourth myth, and that's a good one. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine. I think the last one is the fast-moving consumer packaged goods, where you would just not expect AR to play a role. But if you think about it, one way to decommoditize yourself from competitors is to surprise and delight. And Amazon did this amazing thing where you can play with the packaging. So, you know, kids love playing with boxes, but imagine if the box came to life. So yeah, we're seeing lots of different verticals benefit from AR.
Here we go, Keith. I don't know how much you can share about any of these things, obviously in terms of specifics, but you probably have some opinions about this and CPG and how this as a storytelling medium can be effective. Because I think the initial reaction would be, well, you know, spinning around a product package, a tube of toothpaste, a box of cereal, but that's not interesting. But I don't think these are the scenarios we're talking about when it comes to a CPG. It's not about looking at the product box, right, Keith?
It's not about looking at the product box, Tony, but it really goes back to, you know, the original days of marketing and advertising, right? We're marketing and advertising that product to solve a problem in your life, or to fill a gap or something along those lines. And in the past, you know, we'd make a TV spot showing those use cases. Hey, here's how this tooth whitening is going to, you know, whiten up your teeth like never before. And that would be done with TV. But now with AR, we can actually show that. I mean, that's a personalized experience. So really, we're just taking the traditional methods of advertising and applying them to a new medium and putting the consumer first. And for consumer packaged goods, when you can connect that utility, that use of the brand with the consumer and put that in their hands, and we all have that smartphone not too far away from us at any given time, that is the real power I see for CPG, right? How is this product gonna help me out? And I can find out right there, you know, maybe right there at the retail store by scanning a QR code on the pack, or scanning, an image at retail, or something along those lines, or maybe clicking directly into a link that comes up in my social feed. So, you know, you're one tap away or one scan away from a really incredible brand experience.
That's great. And that's a real good point, Keith, just talking about some of the capabilities. A lot of us tend to think about AR, I'm guilty of this all the time, as the 3D rendering you see with the phone turned on. There's a digital thing in your space that wasn't there for real, and that's the magic. But the other half of the magic is that the camera is recognizing the world. You're pointing at product packaging, or you're seeing landmarks out in the real world, and there's brand content potentially tied to that with either utility or fun or some combination of the two. So it is about our devices, you know, being able to recognize the world and get more magical in that way too. That's a really great point. We got one more myth to bust. So sorry, Christina, I'm sure you probably have some supporting information there, but let's keep going. And that is that the ROI is questionable. And I am going to start with you on this, Christina, and then move to Zoe at least, but anyone can chime in. And after this, we're going to go kind of free form. Everyone just jump in, stop muting your mics and everything. Let's just go for it. And that one is ROI. So let's do it, Christina. What are we thinking here?
Yeah, so I think that has been traditionally a challenge when it comes to these more immersive ad experiences, right? They are a little bit more complex. Maybe they take a little bit more to build out, a little bit more time. How do you kind of quantify all of that effort, whether it's time spent or monetarily, to make sure that you're actually driving the outcomes for that particular brand? And so some trends that we've been seeing is that advertisers are trying to marry the best of both worlds, where they're taking this immersive ad experience and then trying to tie it to real world business outcomes, whether that's trying to tie it to brand awareness, consideration intent, or intent to purchase, and then leveraging advertising technology where they can't only just measure the effectiveness, right, but actually work to optimize towards those outcomes in flight. We've also seen folks trying to tie, immersive ad experiences to things that are a little bit lower down the funnel as well, which is quite exciting, whether it's some sort of app download, online conversion, or even offline sale.
That's awesome. Zoe, can you pick up on this? Because I think this is a great segue to talk about what the IAB is doing, the buyer's guide we just released that you and I put together with folks from Snap and Facebook and Google, and the board that Keith is on now to continue that work. So why don't you tell folks about the buyer's guide and kind of the roadmap of where we're going a bit on this AR, because I think it's really relevant to measurement and outcomes more than anything almost.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the buyer's guide that we released earlier this year was intended to kind of give marketers an idea of the end-to-end opportunity. And now our next iteration is to kind of drill into that ROI and measurement component, because what we're seeing is AR can be used all along the funnel and including the lower funnel. And on the slate for this year is sort of an ROI creative showcase. So we showcase campaigns with the biggest ROI across verticals, and across those campaigns, identify a recommended way to measure ROI. And this is with a view to, in 2022, coming up with some global standards that we can all really speak the same language and measure across campaigns more easily.
Yeah, that is awesome. And that is another natural stage of the evolution. Like you were talking about, Zoe, the internet was a fad until it wasn't. Mobile video and advertising was a fad until it wasn't. It was, and then all of a sudden you need to have it somewhere in your strategy, right? And we'll get to that when we get to the actionable part of all this in a bit. Well, that's the setup. Look, folks, I feel we've already busted a lot of these myths, but I'm a little close to this. So I'd love to hear what folks in the audience think at some point about that, either via Q&A or any follow-ups we do later. So now I want to kind of change gears, and I want to go to a little more free form and visionary and start with my friend Keith here to talk about storytelling. We're going to kick that off in a second. I just want to point out we're already getting questions from the field. They're all very sort of high level and general, and probably for a lot of you. So these I'm going to hold to the end. Any of you panelists who see anything that can be answered live right in here you want to type, you can do that as well and multitask if you want. That's one great thing about doing a Zoom call. You can actually answer questions while the panel is going live. So I'd encourage that too. But just wanted to point that out there as a program note. All right, so let's talk about storytelling here, Keith. And this is what brought you and me together in a sense, right? This is potentially the most compelling and explosive and actionable and engaging storytelling medium we've had in the history of media. Just to put it out there, that's the way I think about it. I feel
no small feat. No small feat.
Yeah, no small feat. And we're still building the plane as we're flying it too. It's not. This isn't a done deal. There's just so much potential to this. So, talk to us about that.
Yeah, look, with AR is really the optimal next generation medium for storytelling, and especially for younger audiences that brands are trying to reach right now. This is the participation generation. I want to join in. I want to participate. I want you to give me something to do so then I can create with these tools you're giving me and share it with my audience. And whether that audience is 5 people or 5 million people, the Gen Z, the millennials, really, really reach out for that. So when you can take a storytelling medium like AR and put that in the hands of the people who really crave these unique experiences, you've got something really special. We learned quite a bit about this when we launched JFK Moonshot for the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. And really, it was a brief that is not uncommon to marketers. Help us reach millennials, Gen Z. How do we drive them into the library with something disruptive? And with JFK Moonshot, which was an augmented reality recreation of the Apollo 11 mission to the moon, we distributed that out in advance of the 50th anniversary and to massive global success. Not only did we draw the attention of millions and reached even billions of people around the world, but, leaning into AR as a storytelling medium gave every person who participated in that, put them in the story. How am I going to launch that rocket? Is it going to come out of my backyard? Is it going to come from my kid's school? And we had 140,000 people download the app. But most importantly, at the end of this campaign and all the magic and inspiration that it created around the world, The library saw a 5% increase in attendance. Great. That was the brief. That's what we were going for all along. And really to help such an incredible institution like that lean into a new storytelling medium, put something out there that's going to live on forever, and engage a whole new audience to learn about the legacy of one of our most famous presidents was an incredible achievement.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, I just got chills reliving and rethinking when you revealed the Moonshot app to me originally. It is an incredible piece of content creation and storytelling. I'll just say that right now. My favorite in the realm of XR documentary storytelling, the fact that you could reach that scale with mobile AR, that you can have that compelling experience is just so impressive. So then Christina, yeah, no, go ahead, Keith.
Well, and Tony, I mean, what stood out the most was the amount of time that users spent in the app, right? And that's something we as marketers crave so much. And really, when you look at these AR experiences, and again, as we're delving into what metrics are important, time spent in engagement is incredibly important. And really, there's not much else out there that can engage like an AR campaign. A video is going to last 15 or 30 seconds. You may see a billboard for 5 seconds, excuse me, but we're seeing people spend 5, 7, 10, 15. People spent 45 minutes in our app, and that's just unheard of. And that's the power of storytelling and putting the consumer at the core.
Wow, that is great. Yeah, Christina, I was just going to play off this a little bit and say, well, so, Keith's in the business of making breakthrough stuff. This is what he does. He does this all day long. He lives and breathes it. This is why, he and I are such good buddies, because we're just like, get so inspired by this stuff. But like, is it a blip? I mean, this comes back almost to the novelty. I mean, what results are you seeing that can show how this can lead to positive consumer sentiment beyond, that one kind of breakthrough experience Keith highlighted? Can we see patterns in this and see just demand overall for this kind of storytelling that could lead to sustainable business for advertisers, for brands to be able to reach in a more repeatable way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I can speak to is what we've seen at LoopMe across all of our advertisers as a whole. And I think on average, what we've seen is that for kind of standard rich media creative, average engagement rates range anywhere between 3 to 5%. Now, when we up the ante there and we include AR, VR, or 3D playable experiences, that engagement rate increases to 5 to 7%. So it's going up quite a bit. Overall customer attention, we've noticed, is prolonged by 47% when you are dealing with interactive video ads. And so all of these things that marketers are doing to kind of create more of an immersive experience is resulting in higher engagement rates. And then because LoopMe is all about measurement, right, and outcomes, what we've seen is that when we loop in one of our purchase through products, whether we're optimizing in flight towards brand awareness lift, consideration, offline sales, or in-store visits, whatever it might be, we've seen campaign effectiveness go up by 2x.
Well, I mean, those are great, super promising early returns on all this stuff, right? I mean, you assume that there's the new is driving some of this now. We hope that you continue to scale like this, and we're not going to see too much of a drop in those kind of amazing numbers and lift. But obviously, only time will tell, and we need to have that runway and platform to keep working on this. Zoe, you kind of have a lens into this from a different perspective recently, where you did the poll that IAB did. I think you can speak about this publicly now, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great, good, because otherwise it would have been bad to bring it up. So the Harris poll, can you walk us through this a little bit and how that consumer sentiment, and maybe, on the heels of the pandemic, and one of these days we won't even have to use that word anymore in these panels, but it has had such an impactful influence on everything and an accelerating influence on everything. And a lot of the poll, I believe, was around, life before, during, and after. So if you could give us a bit of a lens on that tied to, consumer sentiment about storytelling, and this is a media type, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, it was actually IBM that came up with the stat. The pandemic accelerated the shift from brick and mortar to online by 5 years. Like 8,700 stores closed in the US last year alone. And in the Paris poll, we found that 64% of consumers found that COVID showed them how easy online shopping actually is, and 28% of those are interested in using AR to find out more about products while shopping. I think the beauty of it is AR is like user initiated, so you're more likely to have your campaigns get organically shared and go viral. The consumer actually becomes the brand ambassador. They become part of the campaign, which is really, it's almost like an organic form of consumer reviews, right?
Love that.
And in the pandemic, we saw virtual try-ons increase by 32%. And shoppers who try on a product are 3 times more likely to buy. So we're really seeing, what we're seeing is this shrinkage between seeing an ad and experiencing a product. You know, you don't have to see it and then go to the store to try it on. You just kind of collapse that gap, and your propensity to buy just goes, you know, through the roof then.
Yeah, Zoe, we love that about AR. I mean, it really can be taking these transactions almost to impulse buy. It's a super highway through the consumer journey, right? You may become aware of a product. You may tap on that ad, try it on, and buy it, and boom, I didn't even have to retarget you, remarket you.
Yep.
I just, launched you right into that sale. And really, it goes back to something I mentioned at the beginning, which is AR gives you confidence, right? It gives you confidence in that product you're shopping for, that experience, that you're in, to say, hey, I understand now what this product is going to do for me. I've personalized it to myself. And now, but I don't need to go into a retail store if I don't want to buy that product with, this e-commerce button right now, buy now, is great. So yeah, that super highway is critical, and it's the reason why we're seeing these conversion rates we're seeing, these engagements rates that we're seeing, and why, the secret hopefully is out there, the AR works.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to echo, I think what Zoe touched on. If you think about this past year, the pandemic basically turned our world upside down. For the longest period of time, we weren't allowed to leave our homes. We weren't allowed to go into a store and, do window shopping or go through that experience. And so again, I think that this past year has kind of accelerated the utilitarian need of things like AR, VR. And I think we're going to see more of those trends where folks, less about bringing that customer to you and more about you bringing that experience to them.
And post-pandemic, we're all taking stock in our behavior. What did I experience during the pandemic that I want to carry through going forward, even if I'm able to get back out there, hit brick and mortar shops, hit retail. That's great. But what behaviors am I carrying forward from the pandemic? Online shopping, virtual try-ons, product experiences. Those are behaviors that I really do believe that when we look back a year from now are going to be behaviors that people brought out of the pandemic and didn't leave behind. Certainly, we don't want to all stay at home all the time. We're going to leave that behind. But can I shop more effectively using digital tools? Yeah, absolutely.
And Zoe, remind me with was it John from Harris Poll? We actually talked about this in the Q&A in that session. These behaviors are sticky, according to that poll as well. These are here to stay. Everything Keith just said is supported by that polling data as well. That we're not going to return to pre-pandemic attitudes about online shopping, about interacting with AR content. Exactly,
because I think the interesting thing, I think, is that, yes, we expect Gen Z and millennials to be there because they're digital natives. It's the older demographic that didn't really want to change their ways, but were forced to change their ways and are now discovering, oh, I don't need to walk myself. I don't need to carry heavy bags. I can trust my credit card online. All of these. So it opens up whole other demographics. I think that's what we're going to see out of the pandemic, new categories of consumers to target.
Well, all right then. Yeah, we've got one more slice to tackle here, and we're still getting some really great questions on the Q&A as well, and I want to get to them. It's that time in the panel where we're going to do a little bit of future casting, as people do, as is our want in panels. But in this context, rather than thinking about some far-flung sci-fi future of glasses and 5G and all the fun stuff we love to talk about when we're scrying, as we do as industry experts, let's root this in what's practicable now and in the next 2 to 3 years. So frame this in the near future. It's one of the beats that I like to explore a lot. So where are we going to be? I'm going to start with you, Christina. Where do we think we're going to be in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to AR, VR, I think just kind of echoing, what I mentioned previously is that I think that we're going to see more advertisers embracing those formats, and it's going to be less about kind of having that big, flashy kind of PR worthy creative event or marketing campaign, or more about creating kind of useful day-to-day tools that consumers can leverage to learn more about your product and eventually buy. I think marketers as a whole are going to look to make more of their marketing dollars more accountable to things like ROI. Even if the focus is to drive upper funnel awareness, it's going to be all about accountability and measurability. And then kind of, touching on Unity a little bit too, is I think brands are trying to figure out how to kind of play within the mobile and app gaming space. A lot of time is being spent there. I think with the pandemic, it's grown even more. So how do I really take advantage and understand this space to make use of it as a marketer?
Fabulous. Who else wants to jump in on this one? Next 2 to 3 years.
I can go. I predict three things. One, ubiquity. Consumers are going to expect to point their phones at products and reveal additional layers of brand content, expect to step into brand universes and experience a brand in 3D. I think we're also going to continue to see the shift from ads being a one-way, the consumer is the passive receiver, to it being participatory. Conversational AI, all of that is going to contribute to, I did this, so I get a different experience as opposed to if I did something else. And I think we're going to continue also to see the gap between ad exposure and consumer action reduce, right? So we're seeing in China live stream shopping, people watch an influencer, buy it right from the stream. People can try on something and then buy it right there. There's so many less steps now that a consumer needs to take to purchase. So,
yeah, Zoe, I love the word you used, which is ubiquitous. And in 2 to 3 years, I do believe that AR-enabled shopping experiences will be ubiquitous for many of the verticals that we work in. And really, it comes down to a couple things. One, I think there'll be a shift in consumer behavior. We're already seeing this, where we're moving away from text-based searches to camera-based searches. Consumers will be trained, and certainly the pandemic has accelerated that. Consumers will be trained to point their camera at something to learn about it, to understand it, or utilize their voice for something they can't see. That behavior will shift. And when we're using our cameras to shop, AR experiences that are ubiquitous can be tapped into just from a visual standpoint. So now, if you couple that with the proliferation of 5G and utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning to develop what happens when your camera sees something and can give you back that personalized information, we'll be talking less about, hey, how did you make that AR experience? No, that was generated by an artificial intelligence automatically based on what your camera sees. And then layer in 5G, which can enable at higher bandwidth and low latency, can make these experiences so much more high fidelity that it looks real. To me, when you couple that sort of photo real or extreme reality and layer in AI to create these experiences, that's where we'll be able to hit ubiquity. And that's going to be incredibly powerful as a consumer behavior shift.
Well, I want to riff on that last bit, Keith, and that's, I agree around 5G and enabling the photorealism, but it also does facilitate the AI. Not to get too technical, but what we can do with QR codes today by pointing the phone at simple imagery now that is ubiquitous finally after 10 plus years. Amazing. We came back around to that. At some point, the phone recognizes everything. And the way that's going to happen is with edge compute and 5G networks, because that's all about machine learning and delivering the right model to the phone. You don't have a big enough phone, no matter how fast and fat the storage gets on these phones. it's got to live in the network, and it's got to be able to come down, like that machine learning model is going to be able to come down really fast. So little technical sidelight on that, but again, it's the flip side of the graphics is that image and object recognition that recognizes the real world that's also going to be facilitated by the network. And this is all within, so you did play within the rules of my little game here, Keith. That is all probably coming in the next 3 years or so. You know, we'll see exactly what 5G penetration is, but it is looking pretty promising right now for at least some of these use cases. There is one sort of part two to this conversation, which I want to do in about a minute each, because I want to leave time for Q&A. Biggest challenge to get from here to there in those 3 years. It could be a technical challenge, it could be a business or marketing challenge, it could be an interoperability one. You pick each one of you, just grab one out of the air, and what do you think we have to solve between now and that 3-year vision that you have all painted?
Well, first and foremost, education, and we're starting here. Brand marketers largely need to be educated, really from the ground up on how to utilize immersive experiences for their brand campaigns. It's pretty rare that we find brand marketers that are savvy and can apply this technology without support. So at Digitas, certainly we're there to bring not only the education, but the research and the reasons why, and then bringing creative solutions to those problems. So really, we've got a long way to go in educating brand marketers on not only what the technology is, but how they can tap into it. So, that's going to just take time and grind.
Yeah. On my side, I would say just getting the customer really comfortable, right? So what we see kind of more as a technical thing on our side when we're executing these type of ads is just getting the consumer to say, yes, I'll switch on my phone, right? That action sometimes, right, it is hard to get. And so I think as customers start seeing that there is inherent value in these experiences, right, that they're providing, I think they'll become more comfortable with kind of allowing some of these features to be established.
+1 to both of those. I think buyer education, brand education is going to be the first step, and then I'm going to lean into my industry hat and say, I think having a common way to value and measure and attribute these experiences and campaigns is going to be really important, because at the end of the day, people have KPIs to hit, they've got numbers to hit, and being able to compare AR with video spend and other forms of marketing, mixed media modeling will be really important.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's clear we have a theme here around education, and as Keith and you all mentioned, this panel is a good place to start. And that's a great segue into reviewing the 4 myths, and let's see how we did in busting those. That XR is just a fad, that it is too difficult and expensive to produce, that it is only for certain verticals, and the results are still in question, possibly not measurable and actionable. How do we think we did?
Fantastic.
I feel like we did yeah, we rocked it, right? I feel like I think we've come up with some great examples and data and sort of the thought architecture around why that is true. I think the proof will be in the eating of the pudding in the next few years, and we just have to do the work. But I want to thank you all for your participation in this. This is, again, folks, these are the people on the ground doing the work across various axes of solving this problem. So thank you all. This has been a great discussion. I want to have enough time for Q&A, so I'm going to start grabbing the stuff off the Q&A widget here on Zoom. And there's a fellow named Robert Soljacek asking a question. Any relation?
I was going to ask that. Is that your brother?
Brother, son, dad, uncle?
That's my dad, and certainly the
Go
marketing
dad.
legacy in the Soljacek family.
Wow, you
Well,
have
here we
a
go.
dad.
Are you looking at that question, Keith? I had no idea. That's great.
Well, go
Hey,
ahead,
Dad.
Tony.
Yeah, I'll read it. When speaking of metrics, are some of the traditional direct metrics, in quotes, relevant, such as cost per lead, cost per conversion?
They are, the Bible. That has not changed since the days of direct mail, right? How many pieces are you mailing out, and what do you expect to return? How many credit card leads are you driving? Couldn't be any different now. Really, we're still looking at the same thing, right? How are we driving conversion? How are we driving purchase? How are we getting our message into the hands of the consumers? And really, from when we sent out direct mail to now where we can ask you to just activate your camera, we're really asking you to do the same thing, which is consideration, right? Mm-hmm. Consider this brand because, it could help you. It could change your life.
Right. And, all of these, I think, measurements are rooted in those traditional methods, right? And obviously, as we've discovered, Zoe, this is, and all of us working with our brands, that's where we have to start. I would think, though, that we do see some new possibilities, some novel possibilities for different things we could measure that were not measurable before. Each advance in this technology, I think, creates new opportunities for measuring outcomes. And either of you want to, Christina, Zoe, you want to speak to that briefly?
Yeah.
But I mean, again, this is where we have to start with our customers, is what they're comfortable measuring today, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the advancements today of where we can kind of, move beyond, engagement, upper funnel engagements, along with kind of traditional online DR performance goals like cost per leads, cost per sign up, is we now have the ability to actually tie it to offline sales and real world outcomes, right? Whether that immersive experience actually, drove the consumer to actually go into an auto dealership, right, and purchase and consider buying a car. Whether that CPG immersive experience actually, enacted a consumer to go to Target and purchase that product in store. So I think that's what's exciting about today, is our ability to basically take ad exposure and then tie it to a wide variety of outcomes, whether it be online or offline.
Zoe, anything to throw in there?
Yeah, just to add, I think the thing that's changed between when we had traditional metrics and now is, social commerce and social platforms. So you can measure the shares, you can measure how many times someone leaned into your experience and get that amplification, which is so valuable.
Oh my God, thank you guys. The rest of the Q&A is so beastly. I mean, each one of these topics is probably an hour to unpack. So let's do what we can until BI gives us the hook here, because these are all really great questions. I'm gonna start with this one. These are all from anonymous attendee. How are you managing and navigating your business, your customer strategies, and employee engagement, particularly over the past few months? Who wants to take that one?
Customer strategy and employee engagement, particularly. So I think I can speak to that, I guess, a little bit. So from kind of a partner perspective, right, a technology company, the past few months have definitely kind of been very unique. I think some of the things that we've kind of enacted is for our remote offices, we actually made 100% of that work remote. So we're not returning back to an actual official office. We recently went through a sales training as a sales team. And one of the things that the trainer kind of told us was that we should make every client meeting 30 minutes, every pitch 30 minutes. We start off with an agenda. Don't ask people to be on a Zoom call with you for an hour hearing a Zoom pitch, right? So make the best use of people's time. And then I think to kind of help with everyone's sanity, we're really trying to focus on culture and mental wellness for our team as well. So I think when the pandemic first hit, we were all working from home. I feel like we were working extra hard because we wanted to prove that we can do this. We're responsible. We can still do our job from home. And I think there was quite a bit of burnout. And so it's something that we're becoming more aware of and trying to invest in.
And in the advertising world, it's a highly collaborative industry. Certainly, whether you're at the whiteboard or you're at the bar, you're collaborating with both your colleagues and the clients that you work with. And we craved that and we lost that. So, a sizable contingency of our folks met up in VR and utilized some of the co-working collaboration tools and virtual reality to bring back that sense of presence and actually have a virtual high five or, stand around a whiteboard and draw something out. And certainly, Zoom is great for connecting instantly, but, virtual reality experiences are fantastic for combining that instant connection with presence. And we missed it. I know we're all looking forward to getting back into the office soon, but I don't think we'll leave behind what virtual and immersive experiences and collaboration tools can offer us as a in a creative medium.
That's a great point. That's a really exciting point of view too, Keith, is the idea that there could be some of these virtual collaborations with immersive tech as well. All right, let's at least hit one more of these here. This is a fun one. We could go probably for the rest of the session on this. How do you see your audience demographic expanding to be more inclusive as the industry grows and evolves?
Well, look, inclusivity is in augmented reality is really powerful. We're tapping into the camera. So as soon as we turn that camera on, and if the consumer allows us, certainly we're asking for permission, we're asking for opt-ins. But if they are looking for a highly personalized experience, then because we have the camera, that experience can be inclusive and can really take in some of the traits of either your surroundings or you personally, and customize that, in an inclusive way. No longer do you have to use your imagination to see yourself in one of these brand experiences. It's you. And I think that's a really powerful way in really eliminating, some of that inherent bias, maybe in some of the legacy technologies. So using the camera is fantastic for inclusion.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of like democratizing advertising, right? And so I think instead of the brand kind of creating an ad and putting people in the ad that they feel like, are their demographic or their customers, right? It allows consumers the ability to put themselves in that experience. So everybody is a potential, involved in that experience.
It almost comes back to the theme of the panel, right? And this is where we started, that it's a collaboration between the consumer and the brand and the creators that a lot of this gets collapsed and is more immediate and is much more, these feedback loops are much tighter. Keith, go ahead, Zoe.
I was gonna say, talk about engagement. Like before, engagement just meant someone had their eyeballs on your ad. This is like people are actively participating. And if you think about neuroscience, the more muscles, the more you have to participate in an experience, the more memorable it is. I think Mindshare, the study that everyone quotes, the Mindshare study, 70% better retention rate with AR because you're so much more engaged with so many more senses. So.
Yeah, and that the fluidity of this medium, the ability to recognize the world, this is a whole new table stakes, and it's so different from the more traditional things you were just mentioning, Zoe, and just putting ads in front of people where you had to guess who the people were. I mean, and the people were of a certain race, a certain age, and a certain gender, and lived in a certain place, or all these demographics that we had to construct and theorize and then in bulk throw at people. We now have at our disposal much more responsive technologies for telling the story, including people in the story, and having cohorts of one even to the extreme, right? Keith, you want to pick up on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, and look, in a increasingly cookieless world, personalization is key. If I've reached you and I've found you without a cookie, then that experience has to be adaptable to who you are on the other side of that. And certainly, we're not totally in the Wild West here, but certainly we've got to have these AR experiences that are adaptable. And again, if I can take that AR experience, find some utility, find some engagement, or just have a little bit of fun, create some content, that's a different value exchange for the brand completely. Whereas, yes, I was able to find you because of a cookie and then you viewed my ad versus, without a cookie, you've discovered this AR ad, you've created a piece of content, and you shared it out to your followers. That's a completely different equation. And I'm excited to see how we can take that.
Wow, we are coming real close to time here. So any last little thoughts? Everyone gets a last word here. Jump in, don't be shy. Take a half a minute, and then we're gonna wind up.
I kind of like the last question that was like, what trends in consumer behavior are particularly important?
We can absolutely key in on that too. I just want to make sure we have time to do it justice. So go for it, Zoe.
I was going to hit on it really quickly because I think the interesting thing now is like the shoppable formats and that direct, like see it, buy, and the live stream shopping. Like commerce is just exploding with this shift to digital, and I just think because commerce is exploding, I hope brands make the connection with how much AR can help that. So.
Yeah, I would just encourage marketers here to lead with strategy, right? What's that insight that you've extracted from your research that is going to move the needle with the consumers you're trying to target? And then how do you bring that to life in an immersive way? It doesn't just have to be AR to be AR. And certainly not every AR campaign is going to work if it's not backed by data, insights, and a solid sound strategy. So really, if you're going to lean in, I would encourage marketers to start there. Use the data, utilize the insights, and then utilize a creative shop that can mold that into an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Christina.
On my
It's on
side,
you.
so
Like, take us
I've been in
home.
digital advertising for quite some time. And I remember when they said video advertising was a fad, like that was going to go away. And then I remember mobile advertising was a fad, like that wasn't a real thing. And so I think when it comes to AR, VR, we're just getting started, and I think the abilities that our smartphone has now, right, the technical limitations, it's just the beginning. And I think as we see that evolve, this is going to become more common practice, I think, for advertisers, which is exciting.
Yeah, so
That
get
is
in
so
now while
exciting.
the space is uncluttered, right? I was
Say that
saying,
again, Zoe.
so get in now while the space is uncluttered. Like learn what works for you. Don't wait till the last minute when it's, when everyone's on there.
Absolutely, and we are all here to help you on that journey. This has been really great. I want to thank our hosts at Brand Innovators, and I want to thank our amazing panelists and my dear friends, Zoe, Keith, and Christina. Can't wait to see you all IRL. And Ariel, hello. I'm going to hand it back to you at BI. Thank you for having us.
Thank for inviting us.
Thank you all for joining. What an incredible, insightful panel. That was just so amazing. I have no words.
Well,
So
okay
then. So thank you all for joining. I will now bring on our next panel of the day. We have another exciting lineup of speakers for you all. We're going to be talking about the new age BevAl consumer. So please welcome 4 panelists: Brad Schultz, the co-founder and CMO of Future Proof Beatbox Beverages; Brandon Schwartz, the co-founder and president of Drinksmith; Tim Angelillo, founder and CEO of Sourced Craft Cocktails, and all moderated by Liz Denworth, the Vice President of Sales at McMac. Welcome.
Thanks, Tony.
Everybody, just jumping on right now.
Everyone transitioning, I see.
Well, here's the good news. This officially makes it 5 o'clock somewhere.
Exactly. How are we all doing today?
Good. Thanks so
Another
much,
day.
Ariel.
I'll
Yeah,
leave it to you all. Take it away, Liz.
great to be here.
Awesome. Is it 5 o'clock in Austin or the West Coast? I don't think it's that late just yet, but
It's always
love the
5 o'clock.
optimism, Tim.
I was gonna say.
I'm starting with T.
I was so
Not fun.
excited to moderate this panel because who doesn't love to talk about cocktails and alcohol at any time of the day? So
Right.
really excited to be here. Well, thanks to Brand Innovators and thanks to the panel today. I'm really excited about this conversation, and obviously thanks everyone in the audience for making time. I think we have an amazing panel, a lot of really cool brands and entrepreneurs. So we have a lot to learn from this panel. So by quick way of introduction to me and to McMac, I'm sure most of you on the line don't know McMac. We are the leading e-commerce acceleration platform for multi-channel brands. And really what that means for brands that live in the dark when it comes to that end-to-end consumer journey, we provide enablement tools and data sources to really help brands improve their marketing effectiveness, shorten their consumer path to purchase, improve market share, and strengthen their relationships with their consumers, and customers, which are their retailers. So we had a layup in the last conversation about the explosion of commerce. So we'll talk a little bit about commerce, and certainly we'll talk about consumer engagement, right? The new consumer who's at home. We're all drinking at home more than probably we thought we ever were. So Really excited about the conversation today. And so let's kick things off. Tim, do you maybe want to just give a quick introduction to you and a little bit about your journey? And I don't know if we should call you Tim the bartender. I heard that on a podcast, or what's the right way to address you?
Yes, I am definitely Tim, your virtual bartender. Thank you for having me, and thanks. It's an honor to be with the other panelists. At Sourcecraft Cocktails, we are at the intersection of mobile convenience. We all have one of these. It's what I like to refer to as your remote control to life. And we source, hence the name of the business, Sourcecraft Cocktails, everything you need for a craft cocktail from that remote control to life directly to your unlicensed front door. So what we built was what we call the non-premise, which is essentially the legal distribution of alcohol to these doors that are not a bar or a liquor store. So we helped, along with some of my fellow panelists, as well as others like Drizzly, we helped innovate alcohol distribution, a $254 billion annual marketplace that's recession-proof. Y'all enjoyed 14% more ounces of alcohol in 2020 than you did in 2019.
Those are facts.
So real big market that literally will never decline, but its regulatory environment is in the equivalent of December 6, 1933. And so that's really what Sourced was built to solve for, was that distribution model, so that the 21st century consumer could have a cocktail in their home or office right from their magical device.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Tim. And Brandon, do you want to go next and give a quick introduction?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Schwartz. I'm one of the co-founders, president of Drinksmith. We make these fresh bottled craft cocktails using proprietary patent pending tech. So the drinks, they're separated. You twist them to combine the liquor and the cold pressed juice. And on the back end, we use this unique cold pressure tech that basically brings the microbial count of the drink or the fresh ingredients down to 0. We get 5 months of shelf life with that. So, similarly to Tim and Brad, there's a lot more that goes on with alcohol distribution, especially when you have to distribute it cold. So, we're innovating there as well. But I'm happy to be on and excited to be on with Tim and Brad and you.
Awesome. Well, Brad, why don't
Definitely.
you take us home here?
I think I contributed to a few percentage of that, Tim, that increase last year. But hi, I'm Brad Schultz. I'm a co-founder, chief marketing and experience officer at Future Proof. So we make innovative beverages that are designed for the next generation of drinking. We think that there's just a huge movement, as we've all seen by now. Wasn't so apparent 10 years ago when we started, but the next generations are picking up different kinds of drinks. They're looking at stuff like what Brandon's making and different experiences like what Tim's bringing. So our first product we made, we innovated on boxed wine. It was called Beatbox Beverage. It is called Beatbox Beverages.
Yeah.
So we took the concept of a wine and made fun flavors like a fruit punch and a blue raspberry, and went on Shark Tank, got $1 million investment from Mark Cuban, and learned a lot about this industry that hopefully I can share with people here. And it's every day is super fun and exciting. And this last year certainly brought on a lot of challenges, but we're in the best position we could be now, and learned a lot. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm fully expecting us to get some questions about your Shark Tank experiences.
Oh yeah.
Today, so feel free to drop those questions in. All right, cool. Well, let's get started. I mean, we've seen some of the big kind of alcohol players out there talk a little bit about their predictions about, drinking at bars may never come back to pre-pandemic levels. Also, we're talking about going into the roaring 20s, right? We're going to have our own version of the roaring 20s. I think that's some of the chatter out there. So maybe Tim, if you could kick it off, what are some of your thoughts about basically the return to on-premise drinking? What's your take there?
Yeah, I think it is going to happen. I certainly hope, both as a business leader in the alcohol space and as a personal consumer, right? Sourced was never meant to replace the on-premise experience. I've been happily married for 16 years. And if I want to stay happily married for 17, I'm going to go out on date night once or twice a month, like that's going to happen. And we're going to go have a nice cocktail. And what Sourced was meant to do is, when you're not in an on-premise account, you can still conveniently have the highest level of quality. And we sort of add into that the educational piece. So a lot of what we do is make sure that we're teaching people about the spirits they're enjoying. So people often will say to me like, oh, mezcal, it's exactly like tequila. Well, it's a different plant. It's grown in a different way. It's grown in a different region, different elevation, twice as long, harvested the same way. The only thing that's the same about it. And then it's processed by smoking it like a brisket. So it's a completely different taste profile. So we're trying to teach people kind of that educational part so that when you go back to the bar and you see mezcal on a menu, you can go, oh, it's smoky. I like smoky, right? And have a good consumer experience. So I do think on-premise will come back. I do think that will be a good thing for Sourced. We're trying to take more share for cocktails specifically. So that really fits for us. And I think the cocktail side of the alcohol industry has been doing a really good job of that the last 15 years. And we have a big opportunity in the next 10.
Great. Yeah. Brad, what are your thoughts on premise? Are we coming back to a hybrid on-premise at home?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with Tim there. Our brands, our products are all positioned in the off-premise. So about 99.9% of our sales are done, at home, and even more so, they're value-based. So I think as a patron of the bars and as a consumer, I certainly think that there's some pent-up excitement to get back. And, I don't know if you've been out to a bar recently, but there is just a renewed energy there. And it is more of, it's almost an appreciation for being around other people and sharing drinks together. And I think there's something wired in our human nature to crave that type of experience. So I don't think it's going away. I do think the mix of products that are sold are going to change a little bit. I don't know if lines are going to be a thing, if people are going to be wanting crowded around waiting at a bar. So you might see some more ready to drink beverages, some stuff that could be turned quickly might make their way in there. And you're seeing a lot of the spirits brands going into that format too. So
yeah, that's interesting. Brandon, do you have a similar POV? You think it's going to be on premises coming back?
Yeah, I have a similar POV. I think, we're definitely hardwired to want that connection, see each other in person. Maybe hardwired, by DNA to go into the bar too. I don't know, Brad, maybe. But I think, you're seeing reports from the IWSR and all these other, trend news publishers. And I think as more people get vaccinated, it's just going to create more comfort with being together in person. But I agree too. I think that's an interesting perspective. Like, will that pent up demand create so much, kind of wait times to get into bars that they all of a sudden need to start selling ready to drink cocktails? But I think that, all the to-go regulations, I guess the core of the question is like, are we concerned as marketers, as product companies, that this spend is going to transition, from online back to the bar? And I think, something that's interesting to think about too is a lot of these bars and restaurants now have this ability to do to-go drinks, they can, as long as it's prepackaged. So I think we're seeing a lot of bars and restaurants contact us to either make private label, versions of our drinks for their establishment, and or, just sell our drinks, themselves, because now they're like, well, we've got this email list and we got this social presence, and I can do drinks to go. So why don't I just make this new revenue stream for myself? So there's been a lot of that where we're all of a sudden, like, prior to the pandemic, we're thinking, oh, the on-premise, we would go to a bar and they would be like, this is silly. Why would I ever support this? 90% margins on my, on this that goes into a glass versus yours, which is like 50% margins. And, but now it's like, well, we have this other way to market the brand, so we might as well. So I think it'll come back. I think it is coming back. I think you just go into a bar these days and you're seeing, people don't really seem to be that uncomfortable. I think it's just, as time goes on, people we'll start to forget a little bit more about the pandemic and get more comfortable, and we'll be back to where we were.
Yeah, totally. I moved from Brooklyn to Charleston during the pandemic, which was basically almost going into a different world as it relates to just being out in bars and restaurants. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to see how people are just starting to almost get back to normal. So with that in mind, I mean, Tim, you mentioned this in your education piece about how you're messaging your consumers and how you're educating your consumers. So, as we kind of enter this new phase, how are you guys successfully engaging your consumers now? Are you taking new messaging approaches or channel approaches or tactics in terms of your digital marketing or, digital touch points with your consumer? How is that evolving for you guys as we start to kind of, evolve into the next phase of your consumer who's still at home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we're a little bit different on two kind of axes. One is some of the other big e-com delivery platforms, the Drizzlies, Reserve Bars, Mini Bars of the world. They serve a great marketplace, which is delivering a bottle. And we serve an entire experience. So it's the bottle plus everything else to actually make a fresh cocktail. And so I think part of that differentiation allows for us to have a very big enterprise business. So we are of service to 18,000 office managers across this country, Google, Facebook, Netflix, MetLife, UBS, Accenture, so on and so forth. We're helping them create company culture through the social aspects of employees getting to know one another. And we do that virtually in a product called Source Social. We deliver all the cocktail kits to the employee's front door. Everyone hops on a Zoom like this, and we do that really high-end education, usually with our brand partners. So, we'll tell you how to take mezcal and make it into a great cocktail, but we'll let the actual distillery tell you how the mezcal is processed. Right? Is it really a donkey that walks around the top and pushes oxygen down the pipe? I don't know. Why don't you ask the people that actually own the distillery in Oaxaca, right? So, I think for us, because we service a full experience, I think that gives us a very unique way to do that education in our enterprise product, because we're not just delivering the bottle, we're delivering an entire experience. The second piece that I think is pretty different is we're not just e-com. So we're built to distribute to non-premise any door that is unlicensed. And with those 18,000 office managers prior to the pandemic, we were doing in their office, which is not a bar and it's not a liquor store. We were doing in-person events. And so I think for us, as we come back out the other side and companies decide for flex working, which they're going to bring employees into the office 2 times a week, we think our fresh draft cocktail machine, sourced on tap, size of a Keurig, as a subscription product, we've seen really strong demand, particularly from a lot of our tech companies. Because the part that's weird, right, is the company has to reel the employee back in. Like they have to convince them with something beyond their salary, which is mind-blowing, but true. Because 61% of people will just quit and go get another job. It's like, oh my God. So paying you and your healthcare is no longer enough. Like you're going to have to lure them back in. And what makes this better than me being at home, not with this commute? And the social aspect of company building with alcohol is going to be a part of that. So we think there's a big opportunity for our sourced on tap machine.
I love that. I mean, that's a brilliant idea, right? It's just hooking into company culture and creating that sustained culture, especially during times like this and in the future. So it's a wonderful, amazing idea. I wish I thought of it myself. So Brandon, Brad, do you guys have any thoughts in terms of what tactics you guys are taking today in terms of message or channels or even messaging that you guys are kind of sending to your consumers to engage them?
Who goes first?
You got it, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we always thought that e-commerce was going to be important, but then, the kind of acceleration of that habit, just happened because of COVID. So, I mean, our product was made to be, I think the reasons why it's good are also the reasons why it's COVID friendly just by nature. It's low touch. It's at home. It's convenient, it's fresh, cold pressed. So I think we were kind of set up with we didn't really have to do too much. We kind of launched during the pandemic. So it was like, we didn't really have to pivot into new messaging, I guess. I think similarly to what Tim was saying, there's definitely a lot of budget out there for, corporate companies that are looking to engage employees and help create culture and, woo clients and stuff like that. So we leaned into that, and, we also have, a strong contingent of the business that's going after corporate event planners. And we do digital events also. All of our bartenders behind each drink will come on and, they'll talk about the recipes and kind of engage the group. But yeah, I think it's about, at this stage, it's really about kind of showing convenience, showing how the experience is going to be, how easy it is, making it, super shoppable. I think pre-pandemic, e-commerce was a little bit clunky. Brands just didn't really focus on it that much, and it'd be frustrating for a customer to kind of, check out even. So I think it's, you gotta have the product, number one, but then if you're going to be kind of engaging that pandemic audience, what kind of messaging, what kind of flow works, it's got to be super easy and convenient. It's kind of like a double work. It's like a lot of groups will just focus on the product and then, lean into traditional distribution. It's not the way it is anymore. I mean, especially if you're a small brand, e-commerce is kind of the way that you can get out there and have a case study to show. So you really have to focus on, showing that in a consumer just how kind of convenient it is for you, because you're competing with Drizzly. You're competing with these other bigger platforms that, they will get the product to that consumer in an hour, and it's probably a bigger brand. So you got to be one step ahead of kind of what you're seeing on digital.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how I think the category has really evolved throughout the last year when it relates to e-commerce. We work with Diageo brands, and we had our customer come in and talk to us at our company offsite last week, and our client there was saying how, before the pandemic, the conversation was really about the on-premise sales teams, right, who are out kind of on the streets talking to all the on-prem guys, and all of a sudden she had a seat at the table and everyone came to her looking for ideas and, how is this going to work? And all of a sudden the strategy just pivoted overnight. So definitely we see it all across the board. Brad, what's your take in terms of how you guys are adjusting from strategies and tactics when it comes to consumer engagement?
Sure. I mean, it's a lot of the strategy hasn't really changed. We've always built this brand around community, and, not having the same resources that some of these other companies have. We've always had to rely on things like social media and word of mouth, and really just anchor those into strategy and make that part of what we do. So, it definitely, a big part of our marketing was centered around music festivals and big events. So that when that completely went away, we did think, okay, well, a little bit of a scramble took place, but we just really doubled down on the excitement that people had when they got our product. And so, I think one thing really that we focused on was just messaging, because I think that's a lot of the things that took place too was, you could get canceled with a tweet, and you could, a lot of really hypersensitized environment too, in addition to just being shut down. So we just said, look, our brand is all about people having fun, and now more than ever, people really need to have fun. So I'd say if you look at like some of how the content has shifted a little bit, it's just way more not taking ourselves seriously, really, really fun. And consumers have just really responded. So that was a big shift, versus the old, partying together. It was always just a party. It became like, how are consumers actually partying in this new environment? So,
yeah. Well, we've talked a little bit about like mixologists and some of the, bring the people actually from the distillery into the education piece of this. How are you guys maybe successfully working with influencers or mixologists today in terms of really engaging with your consumers in digital channels? I don't know, maybe Tim, it seems like you guys do quite a bit of this. So maybe we can start with you in terms of what's working from an influencer and kind of brand ambassador perspective for you guys today?
Yeah, we were really fortunate. We ended up doing 2,314 companies through this experience last year, which is,
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a lot of them. And it was pretty incredible because it was actually 300% more than we had done in person the year prior. Which was
everywhere last year.
Yeah, it was a really interesting silver lining. There weren't a lot in COVID, but that was one of them for Sourced. I think there's there are two pieces to that puzzle. Number one, just like Brandon talked about, you got to keep innovating your product. You have to keep innovating that programming, right? Like the agave happy hour and teaching somebody the difference between tequila and mezcal is very, very interesting once. But if that same company like Tinder, we do cocktails every Tuesday for Tinder. They're my kind of people. Like, you guys are fun, right? You cannot do the agave happy hour 3 consecutive Tuesdays, right? You've got to make sure that you're continuing to innovate the programming. And then the second part Brad really talks about, which I think is really important. It's one of the things that differentiates Sourced because again, we just do craft cocktails. Like that's what we do. We don't do anything else, that and that only. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just our viewpoint. Brad talked about not taking it too seriously. We take the production of the ingredients at a level of nerdery that would rival any craft cocktail bar in this country. But the way we communicate with the consumer is much more approachable and much more fun. And what I mean by that is if somebody chooses vodka, we don't give them a bad attitude and go, you should want gin because it has botanicals, right? Like our job, if we think that we're really as qualified as we are, is how do we make vodka the best it could be? So why we should teach you about a neutral grain spirit. Right? We should teach you about flavor profiles that go well with it. We should teach you about the balance of what we call the trilogy, right? Spirits, acidity, and sweetness. And that's what makes a cocktail, right? And it's about making sure that it's still fun and approachable, because the reality is that world that we've all been to as a consumer before the pandemic, where you went into the cocktail bar and somebody gave you a dirty look because you ordered something, that's not a good experience, particularly for a millennial who thinks that they are a TikTok star.
I know I've been judged before ordering a vodka soda at the bar for sure.
Yeah, and that's why people order Chardonnay. And there's nothing wrong with Chardonnay. It's like vanilla ice cream. I really like it, but I don't want to have it for every single dessert for the rest of my life because I'm too afraid to order any other kind of dessert, right? And so I think kind of as you think about virtual programming, it's like, hey, how do I keep it fresh and keep telling new stories that fit my brand, what the audience wants, and our supplier partners? But how do I do so in a way that doesn't make it so seriously that people feel like they weren't qualified to be a part of doing it?
I mean, I love that. Yeah, I feel like I need to go out and learn. I'm learning so much from this talk, just in terms of flavor and profiles, and I need to up my cocktail game for sure.
You're going to be thirsty. I'm so sorry to the audience. I hope you didn't have a busy afternoon, because you're going to need a lunch cocktail.
Well, Brandon, do you guys, or actually Brad, because you mentioned that you did a lot of work at festivals and that was kind of your strategy before. Are you guys engaging with more influencer type of strategies now and education through ambassadors in that sense?
Yeah, definitely. From about 3 years ago, our Series A round, we actually did, as part of the investment, had a number of DJs and influencers invest their own capital into the company. And so typically how we would work together is they would invest, and then they would, if they were playing Coachella, it would be backstage. And if all these festivals that we sponsored, there'd be beatbox there. So it was this 1-2 punch of really authentic brand building. And, when the pandemic hit, all of their shows got canceled. There were no events. And we basically just set up, okay, well, what can we do kind of mentality. And from, early in the pandemic, we actually threw a digital house party. So got them all to produce an hour-long set and streamed it together with the #1 dance magazine. And that was really fun. Also, again, centered around community, bringing people together. More recently, we've been working with some of the comedy and typical influencers that kind of really authentically speak to different groups. And that's been so much fun because, at the end of the day, I call it like peer-ish because, the people don't want to hear from the brands about how cool the brand thinks its own company is. They want to hear from who they want to hear from. And so to see our messaging just get amplified by these really funny, unique, clever influencers just been really fun and just a nice addition to our marketing mix. So
I'm writing this down. So more DJs, more crowdsourcing of influencers for Micmac. Brendan, what about you guys? What about you guys? Are you working with any influencers or taking any strategies in that sense that are working for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, influencers are definitely at the core for us. We just released a new program on our site, so you can actually submit a recipe that will help you commercialize if you drive enough pre-orders and email signups. So that's been kind of fun. But all the drinks that we have, they're all backed by a bartender. Are indeed with a bartender, and then the bartenders actually get paid on the. They don't necessarily need to be people that work behind a bar, but as much as being, drink makers just in their own right. So there's certainly some people that, they're just more online bartenders, creating content. So that's a strong contingent for the company. And then, in all of our paid advertising, we go after, the engagers of all these different influencers. So we have partner access to all their accounts and, we'll target all the people that engage with them. So, I mean, influencers for us is huge, and we use them similarly. They'll get onto webinars, Zooms, Google Meets, whatever it is, and they'll talk about how they went through the process. And sometimes they'll bring on, someone from the distillery as well, just to kind of walk through how the recipe was made. But yeah, I think that story definitely took off for us just because of the pandemic kind of putting bartenders, out of work. It's not like we anticipated that happening, but we had kind of, in the development of the product, we had worked with so many different, great bartenders who really helped us kind of make great recipes. So it kind of was just natural to include them in and compensate them on unit sales. And then we also have an affiliate program too. So when we get contacted by different, different people online who want to partner with us, maybe they don't want to make a drink, but maybe they just want to kind of, push it out to their own audience, they get a commission on sales. So we really leaned into the influencer side of things. It's definitely at the core of what we do. You can turn over the bottle, you see the bartender's, face on the bottle and their handle, and you see the spirits company that they worked with and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's cool. So it's also really like hyper personalized to that influencer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So you mentioned email capture there. It actually reminded me in terms of just kind of thinking about first party data and preparing for the cookieless future that we're all kind of embarking on. So how are you guys preparing, given the very personalized targeting that you're doing now, how are you guys preparing to kind of engage with your consumers once we deprecate cookies in 2022? What are you doing now to prepare, and what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, that one's, there's definitely like a big data loss. So I think, focusing on first party data, having like a subscription with like an Axiom or any kind of third party data provider is key, just so you can kind of enrich and see the, customer profiles that are interacting and engaging, with your site and with you on social. I think, with the attribution windows kind of closing down, it's definitely kind of scary just to see how those metrics change. But yeah, it's all about kind of just leveraging data and becoming really good at incrementality and, kind of closed loop, holdout test stuff that you can kind of see what the incrementality of each platform is. And, I think it's definitely becoming a lot more tight, I guess the best way to put it. It's not as easy as it was a few weeks ago.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But focusing on the data that you do have and maximizing that sounds like where you guys are heading. Brad, do you have any advice for anyone who's also thinking about the cookieless future?
Yeah, I kind of like this question because I think what we're going to see is the scales are going to start to tip back to the marketers who actually are brand builders and do a little bit more of the old fashioned. I think, we've all seen this direct to consumer wave of brands that will literally source a product overseas, scale insanely massively through paid acquisition, and forget about the other part of running the business. And I just think that there's now this going to be the scales will kind of tip back to people that build community and actually have really passionate consumers that will follow you no matter where your platform is. And we've had to learn from the start that you really need people. You need to create people that just are so passionate about what you do. And look at Tesla. They spend $0 on paid advertising. So it's I'm excited for it, to be honest, because I think that when you start to stack up against the resources of the bigger players, they can drown you out in what they can do. I mean, I think Budweiser spends probably more on to boost a post than our entire marketing budget. So,
right.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you're in a unique position where you've done a lot with a little, right? And so you're going to just expand on that and continue to iterate on that as it becomes more and more challenging. Tim, I saw you come off mute, so I feel like you have some thoughts about the lack of cookies.
I think we'll just take Apple as sort of the first silo, right? With the new operating system and allowing consumers to decide what apps like Facebook are going to be able to monitor and not monitor. The stat that was out that I read yesterday, I think in the Times, 4% of consumers opted in, which means 96% were like, nah, I don't want you tracking me. It's like, holy beep. Yeah. We all better get real smart quick, because I agree with both Brad and Brandon. I think you're going to have to do more traditional brand building and I think you're going to have an even tighter direct relationship with your customer. Because it's the idea of just lookalike targeting and then working a CAC out that makes the business model actually work, and then dumping more money in the top of the funnel and watching it work. I think that is going to be very difficult in maybe not 2 years, but certainly 5.
Yep.
Or there's going to be a new platform that's going to go, the hell with that, and we're all going to move.
Yeah, I saw the IAB on the last chat. I was like, I wonder what they're talking about cookie-less feature. So,
cool.
Well, great. We're almost at time. I don't know if anyone in the audience had any questions. I don't see anything in the chat, but I wanted to end on a question that I like to ask on these panels, which is, as it relates to consumer engagement, right? Because that's what we're talking about. But if you guys could build, buy, or kill anything in your tech stack or within the company today, money's not an object. What's your build, buy, kill? You want to go?
As it relates to consumer engagement or just in general?
We can broaden it out if you want, if it's easier to answer from a broader lens.
I mean, if we could build, I'd build just like a factory, just build like, an actual building with filling machines and, mold our product here in the United States and, fill it ourselves versus outsourcing everything. Compliance. I think compliance, having a system, someone out there having a system that allows you to maintain your data, own your data, keep it on Shopify or whatever platform you're on, and not have to be on someone else's subdomain and all the data loss that comes with that. That would be great. I guess, what would I kill? Like 3-tier system, I guess, just make it easier to distribute product. It's kind of crazy.
I would choose the same kill. I would choose the same kill. Yeah. A lot of restrictions dating back to prohibition. Sometimes it's like, wow.
Yeah. That's my
great answers. Brad, Tim, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. So Brad, I'll
go ahead, Tim.
I'll pick up on the here's why the 3-tiered system is not killable. It works exactly as efficiently for the government today as it did on December 6, 1933. You got to remember, what it was trying to do was raise tax revenue to pay for the New Deal. So the way the 3-tiered system works in the on-premise, they, the government, collect taxes 19 times on the same 1 liter of alcohol. That's why it's not killable. It's still working very well. When people sort of get the moral high ground with me of like, oh, you're in the alcohol industry, I'm like, how's your kid's school? It's pretty good. I pay for it, you know? So you got to remember that the reason for the lack of innovation in the regulatory environment is because it is still very effectively collecting tax revenue, which is what the 21st Amendment was meant to do. Which still regulates this evening. So that's why, from our viewpoint, we don't think that that's killable. There's a couple $2 billion of lobby money that's making sure from the existing industry that viewpoint is well articulated. So that's another reason. But at the end of the day, it's still doing exactly what the government needed and wanted it to do. So on our end, what we would build is we would speed up what we're currently building, which is our own ERP. So we made the decision in the middle of the pandemic, not only to expand our geographic footprint and our product footprint, but I decided to put all 3 axes in motion at once, which was either the smartest or dumbest thing ever, too early to tell which is we actually built our own ERP, our own logistics software to handle the back end of the business from the ground up.
You guys are owning the last mile, right? I mean, that makes
totally
sense. Yeah.
Totally. And it was time, and we're 2/3 of the way through. And I would love, all the orders, we have the order management side, the routing side, the sales data side tied to it. And we're on the last part, which is the really, really hard part, which is the inventory yield and trying to manage that. And Brandon mentioned, hey, he'd build a factory so he didn't have to worry about Asia. I mean, God dang, like 30 days became 4 months maybe, and $7,000 air went to $90,000 to ship over air 1 container, which is completely like that. I don't know anybody's business model that works at $90,000 of freight for that, which means you have to go over water. And that uncertainty is really, really tough to manage of like, is it going to be 30 days this time or is it going to be 4 months? And so it's a really hard thing to do, which is why our tech stack's being built with the elasticity to sort of measure what was reality versus our own internal optimism or fear.
Yeah. Yeah. We heard from a customer who was shipping kegs air freight across the ocean. So like, imagine how expensive that was. It's crazy.
Brutal.
Yeah. Crazy. Brad, any thoughts there on our closing?
Oh man, I'll go quickly. I would build a content team to just continuously produce more amazing content, compelling, get it out there. I would buy more sales team members because a lot of people don't understand the challenge of breaking down the 3-tier system when you have a product. And right now we're only in about 3% of the total possible stores that people can even buy the product at. So buy a ton more sales team members. And I would absolutely kill the laws and regulations as they relate to beyond, I get the value of the 3-tier system, but in the marketing, a lot of people don't understand some of the insane regulation and laws and guidelines that exist, from whether it's not showing people actually drinking your product to a whole host of just insanely archaic, crazy laws that are different on a federal scale, and then state by state have their own different regulations of how you can even market your product. So I'd get rid of those.
Yeah, Brad, you'll love this. So Mississippi just passed a delivery bill, HB 1215. So July 1st of this year, you'll be able to deliver into Mississippi, but 2/3 of the counties are dry.
Oh,
so literally you're like yes. And then
who
you're
are you
like,
delivering to?
Yeah. Like, okay, Oxford, Lafayette County's wet county. There we go. And we're done in Mississippi. It's like, it's a good reason to wish to kill, because man, it is really, really complicated.
Yeah, no, it's so funny that, and I don't know how much the consumers actually understand, but you can't buy liquor in a grocery store in Texas, but you go over to California and they're in every grocery store, and same product, just done 2 different completely ways. So
That's what we like to refer to as there are 50 countries.
Here we go.
As it relates to the alcohol industry, there are 50 individual countries, and then it can get down to the county level. But that is also the opportunity for us on the innovation side, right? Is figuring out a way to work with inside the framework and make the consumer journey more engaging, more convenient, and a higher quality experience. That's what the three of us are doing. And it's been fun to be with you today, even early talking about the booze business. That's why we all love our jobs.
Actually, we have 7 more minutes. Actually, I was wrong on our time, so that's on me. So we have time for more questions. We did get one from the audience. There's a question about how you guys have been evolving your relationships with your colleagues and your teams during the pandemic. It's very clear you guys are building amazing cultures and amazing products and stories. So how have you kept culture? How have you evolved culture during the pandemic? And has building your team changed at all as we've kind of gone virtual?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we kind of started off thinking that we'd have an office and we'd bring people in, and then kind of right as we began taking off, the pandemic hit, so those plans were thwarted, and pretty much 70% of the company right now is remote. And we try and keep it really lighthearted. It's never too serious. At the end of the day, it's the cocktail business. It's alcohol industry. It's fun, and it's never supposed to be super high stress. So yeah, we try and keep it fun, exciting. We do a lot of stuff on Slack, try and keep meetings to a minimum so people can kind of do their work and not be perturbed by showing the work as well. Just keep it results oriented and lighthearted. That's what we do.
Yeah. I have to imagine too. I mean, we experienced this at Micmac. I mean, we tripled our business last year. It was a pretty crazy year. So, and you guys are all experiencing just crazy growth. So how do you manage that team culture and the growth portion with being remote as well? Has that been difficult for you?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I already talked, so it's your turn now.
Yeah, so I'll state it a different way. Is it weird that I've never met in person 75% of the people that I pay their salary every day? Like, yeah, that's a little odd. Welcome to some transition in a pandemic. So I'd answer it 2 ways. Number one, you've got to even be more intentional about your North Star. So when I was at Yahoo helping oversee their e-com business, which is where I sort of got the e-com side of my background, we didn't have a North Star. Like we couldn't communicate where we were going every day. Like one day we were a search engine. Whoops, that's Google. And the next day we were going to be a social media platform. Whoops, that's Facebook. Now we're going to be content. Whoops, that's Netflix. And every day we were trying to be something different. And it taught me with 5,000 people worth of an organization, like, wow, I'm driving everybody nuts because I'm trying to drive them a different direction every day. And so I think companies that are very, very intentional about not only knowing what their North Star is, but being able to communicate it. For us, our North Star is to be of service. And so we're very clear in the very first interview. I interviewed somebody earlier today and I was like, look, if you need this to be a world of me, which is like, I'm here and I close a big deal and our company does a ticker tape parade around me, the all-star, don't take the next interview. Literally don't do it, because we want to be of service and we drive our happiness off of someone else's joy. And the only thing we care about is servicing them. And I think the first thing for us is being even more intentional, particularly in the interview process, about really what are the company's values and how does that work? I think the second part is, which Brandon mentioned, which is making sure that it's not too serious. We drink our own Kool-Aid, literally. So we serviced over 2,300 companies, a virtual Source Social, and we enjoyed one for our own company every single week. Right? Does that mean that everybody was hammered every day? Absolutely not. Right? Like that is not what being lighthearted and fun. It means we distributed a 375 milliliter that had 6 drinks, and we did 6 drinks specifically because we wanted to give the significant other in the household something, because we just took over his living room.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love being in service. And I listened to your podcast with you too, where you talked about your values, the 3 T's.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's if you wanted to share that, I don't know if
Yeah, no, totally. So for us, our North Star is to be of service. And the way we do it is through what we call the 3 T's. This is literally the employee handbook. Welcome to Sourced. Trust, transparency, tenacity. That's it. So we trust no one joins the journey that doesn't want to be of service. The reason that's important because we call it brutally transparent. 50% of the things that we try every day are successes. 50% of the things we try are fails, meaning learns. So we'll be very transparent, and people will, like, we had one yesterday where they were just almost yelling at one another, but it was okay that they could both be on opposite sides of the coin, really going at how they thought the success or failure was, because everyone trusted that it was coming from a place of, am I really being of service? Not, I'm doing this because it's my department, so I get to say so. That's bullshit, pardon my French. But that's like a waste of time. But you have to trust that everybody wants to be of service to be able to be transparent, which brings us to the final T, the tenacity is what we call want to. Elon Musk put a Tesla in outer space, got a picture of Earth as backdrop for a PR stunt, and sent it on to Mars. I'm pretty sure that any of us can do anything we want with our cocktail delivery business if we want to, if that was possible. Right? And that's really how we think.
I mean, that has application into everyone's lives, I think. I mean, if Elon Musk can do that, we all can do whatever we set our minds to. That's awesome.
You got to want to, and you can't go halfway. 50% of the way has a 100% failure rate.
That is true. We got to be able to make mistakes and learn from them. Brad, you got to bring us home. What's on culture and building teams in a virtual world?
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to follow the 3 T's. That's that was pretty solid, but no, that registered here a lot. That's very similar to our core values as a company, which are up on our corporate website and told to everybody at the start. And I think a big help is that years ago we made the decision to give every employee that joins the company equity in the business, and so we look for people that are literally going to think like owners of the business. So, because there is only so much you can do from, a top-down perspective. And so I think people, really appreciate transparency, especially that's one thing that we really learned over the pandemic time. Because when March, if you can remember, people were scared the world was going to end. And then it became more personalized. Is my livelihood going to be here? My job going to be here? And so we got everybody together on a Zoom call, opened completely the books, showed everything, and came out of that so much stronger. And I think the thing that remains now is this level of transparency in the business that you'd probably think is crazy that employees, and so it does rely on trust too. And I think understanding we're all humans in this too has been really helpful. And, at the end of the day, I think Brandon said it, but we're selling booze. We're sell fun is what we say at the end of the day. It's like, that's what our job is to do. And so, we don't take ourselves too seriously.
I love that. The 4th T, right? We talked about the first 3 T's and we'll end it on the 4th T, but, thank you so much, guys. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for your time. And Ariel, welcome back. I'll hand it over to you. Thanks for everyone for listening.
Hi, everyone. That was absolutely incredible. So thank you for joining. We have a minute or so. We're just waiting for our next speakers. So thinking about all the incredible innovators on this panel, what is one piece of advice you would give your younger self? I'm especially wondering this. We could start with, Tim, you want to start?
I'll start. I refer to it as focused on the correct P. It's not perfection. That doesn't exist. Marketers like Brad and Brandon, we make you think. It's a hallmark mirage, right? I like focusing on being present. So I'm blessed to have 3 kids, right? I'm your atypical entrepreneur. I've got 3 kids who are under the age of 10, and that's a big time commitment. It's really important to me. So when I'm doing 6U softball as the head coach of the Pink Diamonds with a pink hat and pink shirt and pink cleats for my sweet pea, Gracie girl, I'm not on Slack in the dugout. I am present in that 90-minute coaching. I've let the company know that I'm not going to be on Slack for that 90 minutes and what the decision-making criteria should there be an immediate need. But when I'm in my work drawer, I'm also not setting the lineup for the Pink Diamonds 6U softball. And you've got to really be present and be fully 110% committed when you're going to be in something to give it a chance to learn, was it a success or a failure? Because the failure is the learning lesson. Some of them are wildly painful to learn, really, really painful, but those are the most important learning lessons. So for me, it's focused on don't be perfect, be present. And when you're present, be fully committed to it, and then be humble enough to evaluate like which one was success and which one was painful learn.
I love that. Don't be perfect, be present. What an amazing line. Brandon, you want to kick off the next answer?
Piece of advice. I guess for my earlier self, man, I'd get like a subscription to PitchBook. You know, just something that would make it a little bit easier to connect. It's kind of crazy. You know, we'll talk to, you know, investors. We're always in the fundraising cycle, it seems like, and it's kind of crazy just to think that years ago it was just scouring like LinkedIn and Crunchbase and all of that, and then finally, you know, got a resource to contact investors. So I think having that is as key. You know, you really have to kind of have a great network and know people, especially if you're trying to make something that's probably far out from building revenue. You need to, unless you're self-funded, you need to find funding. And so having a, you know, great resource to find funding is big. I mean, I agree. I also want to stay present. I've got an 18-month-old, so not in softball or any of that yet, but yeah, I like that.
Totally. Well, welcome to the Brand Innovators community on the networking front.
Yeah.
Do all the networking you can. Brad?
Yeah, man, so many. I feel like this whole journey of building this brand is just kind of a mirror of building myself, you know, and I guess when I was younger, I didn't fully appreciate your own role in all of this. And it's like your projection of yourself is going to be like the ability to basically separate what's going on in the business from what's going on in your life, and understanding that just because something's not working on the business, doesn't necessarily mean something's not working in your life. So I would say just, you know, continue knowing yourself, learning about yourself, how you work, what things excite you in the business. You're not going to do everything. You know, you could be right and left brain, but there's certain things within business that drain your energy, and there's certain things that create more energy. So kind of architecting your role in your company around the things that give you energy and you're really great at, and outsourcing or finding employees or team members that can pick up the other stuff, I think has been a really good learning lesson for me.
Totally. Love that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, everyone, for coming onto the stage today. I'm so excited for you to all be immersed within the community. So continue to join us, and I'm excited to bring you onto the stage at the next summit. Thank you again.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Have a good day. Cheers.
See you at the
Cheers.
bar.
Bye. All right. So with that, I will bring on our next session of the day. Please give a warm welcome to two amazing speakers. First, we're going to bring on Mark Yessen, a digital marketing and audience data strategy leader from Reckitt, and EJ Frenny, the Chief Revenue Officer at Claravine. Welcome both. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Hi, Mark.
How are you?
Doing great. I'll leave it to you both. Have a good time.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'll kick things off, Mark, real quick. I'll do a quick introduction. I'll hand it over to you so you can let the audience know who you are and what you do at Reckitt. Hi, everybody. EJ Frenny. I'm sure I've seen many of you on the Brand Innovators events. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, as Ariel mentioned, over here at Claravine. What we do is we work with some of the largest marketers in the world, helping them take their marketing taxonomy, standardizing it in our platform, connecting it, controlling it across all teams and technologies. So super excited to be talking to you, Mark, today. If you could just give the audience a quick intro on who you are and what your role is at Reckitt, and then we can kick things off.
Yeah, thanks, EJ. Great to be with you today. My name is Mark Yessen. I am at Reckitt. I work on the US-based health brands that spans the upper respiratory health portfolio as well as sexual well-being. And I'm responsible kind of on our internal brand marketing team, kind of overseeing our audience strategy, our data integrations, and things of that nature.
Great. What are some of the brands that you work on specifically in the health sector?
Sure. So under upper respiratory, it's brands like Mucinex is a flagship brand for OTC, as well as Delsym, the cough suppressant. Historically, we've had Cepacol as well, the throat lozenge, but that's going to be morphing into Mucinex sore throat later in the year. On the sexual well-being side, brands such as Durex and KY. And we've actually made a couple strategic acquisitions that will be announced, and some have already been announced this year that will be kind of entering the health portfolio back half of 2021 and into 2022. One is our sexual well-being brand, and another one is a health-based brand. We're excited about that because it'll be less relegated to seasonality, right? It won't be upper respiratory or kind of cold and flu med in nature, but it will fit within the health portfolio. So it'll kind of diversify and broaden our reach in that space.
Great. And for those of the audience that don't know, I mean, Reckitt is obviously a massive global brand with some of the most recognizable brands in the world. I'm sure that the vast majority has a Reckitt product in their house right now, probably Lysol, especially over the last year. So I know this whole event, it's about consumer engagement, right? It's a large consumer packaged goods company that spans the globe. So much change, and I'm sure this has been a topic of conversation over the last day. But as more consumers, you think about the change in consumer behavior, consumption, purchase behavior over the last year post-pandemic. As more people are shopping from home and their consumer behavior has changed, more and more. The good news is people are getting out and about. But over this last year, with all these changes, with people being at home, having to engage with brands at home, how has your consumer engagement strategy changed, if at all?
I mean, it's definitely changed quite dramatically, and it's kind of evolves quarter over quarter as I think new learnings happen, and it does change brand to brand. I think most immediately post pandemic, as things kind of shifted into Q2 of last year, we the first immediate move we made was to kind of pull back on a lot of our drive to store and location based initiatives for obvious reason, and I think that made sense in Q2 and Q3 of last year. Then going into Q4 of last year, even though we were still in the heat of, the pandemic and, cases still skyrocketing, we did see a reason and need to kind of resume location-based pushes, not just geofencing, but all things around location, how we kind of drive to location and measure and track around location-based utilization. But I think the biggest change that was true then and true now was just a massive uptick in terms of how we activated from more of an e-commerce lens and a D2C lens, being that I think all of our brands have much more lower funnel focus now than they probably ever did prior to 2020 and the pandemic starting. But I think that remains something that will continue, I think, forever be a big part of our philosophy. I think it's just interesting to note, right? Because like you mentioned, we are a very large and matrix global organization housing a lot of different brands. There's also those silos that exist within the organization, right? So I think like that said, we now look at things much more full funnel based, where we're actually now doing beyond just awareness, consideration, and purchase, but multi stages of the funnel from a consumer engagement and from a consumer kind of tracking standpoint, all obviously with the hope of driving increased sales. But now doing customized messaging, customized creative by channel, and even doing that within specific audiences and certain data channels that we're leveraging across the media mix.
Great, and you, there was a lot in there that I do want to get back to. We'll talk audiences, we'll talk creative. There's a lot. You referenced and I mentioned massive global brand, right? How do you orchestrate all those changes across a company as big as Reckitt? What does that look like?
I mean, it's definitely not done in one fell swoop, right? Like everything done very much down to the region, the global region, and as well as the brand, right? I mean, we look at it really on a brand by brand level. Some of the brands are fully global in nature. Others are, some are just U.S. and North America and Canada based. Some have, heavier presence in EMEA and abroad. So everything kind of starts on the brand level. And I think, obviously everything is budgeted that way as well. So one of the things I think that we look at is one of the things I look at it specifically is like, what does our data infrastructure look like for that given brand? Like, do we have first party data being captured? Do we have kind of a CRM enrollment acquisition based program? If so, then how do we leverage that in as part of the overall mix with our other kind of second and third party data integrations and partnerships? If we don't, then then obviously we will. I also help to manage our internal DMP in terms of how we're actually managing tracking, creating our own first party data beyond just enrollment. So looking at users' engagement with our properties, with our media, and really across any kind of branded touch point, and how we kind of build that into both like a retargeting and a lookalike standpoint.
Great. There's so many different avenues we could go down with the data conversation, first party data specifically. You touched on something a little bit earlier around, Reckitt has a DTC business. More and more consumer packaged goods companies are really focusing more on e-commerce, on investing in direct to consumer. At the same time, you also have robust relationships with massive distribution vehicles, big retailers, right? The big box retailers of the world. How do you manage attribution when you have all these different customer engagements, these digital touch points, offline touch points? I guess a two-part question. How do you handle attribution from that perspective? But also, how do you orchestrate consumer engagement when you have people coming to your website, buying from downstream distribution or retailers that you may not have purview into? How does that all come together?
Yeah, it's a great question, EJ, and I think again going back to kind of like the individual brand level with lens and focus. I mean, attribution. I think we are consolidating it more, right? So we are unifying it across brands, and driving to consolidated multi-retailer experience, right? So we're taking most of our media across channels, across display, video, social, even search in some standpoints, and from a brand standpoint, driving increased lower funnel activity by kind of this like multi-retailer selectable experience. That helps to give us visibility into that and be able to see sales down to an individual retailer level across the entire spectrum. So whether it's in store, online, pickup, what have you, whatever the different channels are, as well as of course e-commerce and D2C, which we have our own channels and our own kind of purview into those. But I think it's still obviously a work in progress because, like you said, it's very disparate, and there's a lot of different options out there. I think the end goal will continue to have to be how do we unify it, and how do we as an organization unify it. We've already kind of tackled that from a consumer standpoint, but now internally how we're actually getting all the data back, ingesting it, and acting on it. It is piecing together a lot from a lot of different sources.
Great. Sticking to the theme about different sources and distribution channels, the last 5 years, there's been a rise or an acceleration because most of these entities have existed. They're just starting to accelerate around retail walled gardens, retail media networks. You've got Walmart, Amazon, of course, Roundel from Target. How does Reckitt think about leveraging those ecosystems, and what advice might you have for the audience that is thinking about if they haven't already tested those waters, really starting to get in and invest in those channels?
We want to, and we actively are working with and in partnership discussions with all of those entities. I think the biggest change that we're seeing and that I'm seeing in 2021 is that all of these channels are now no longer kind of walled gardens. They have sorry, I just kind of quick distraction. So we're actually like looking to test them and actually use kind of Q4 in a lot of ways as a launching off point to do that with some of the head-to-head tests across these different retailers. The biggest change, sorry, I got my train of thought back, being that these channels no longer operate kind of as walled gardens, and they don't need to necessarily operate as a managed service. Right now, we can actually partner with these data partners, and you mentioned a few of them, and the retail partners, and be able to kind of have a portability of data that didn't exist in 2020 or previously, to be able to actually leverage those audiences, those data sources, and those channels within our own DSP and across our own kind of media mix, which I think marks a pretty profound change, right? It's something that that never was the case before. I think they wanted to perfect their own ecosystem, whether on site or on their off site through an audience extension platform or a DSP. Or even an SSP, right? Like in some cases they're using Index Exchange, in some cases it's like an App Nexus. Now, getting anything out of a black box is our goal, right? And actually getting visibility, transparency, and ability to actually transact and target, on our own terms in our own platforms, is the way that needs to be, and that's the direction we're going. Even just thinking back though, like, a lot of these platforms started only in 2018 or 2019, so they don't have a really robust track record. So yeah, we're definitely planning to start testing that this year and into next in a pretty impactful way, and then the optimization will be a natural part of that.
Great. What other channels or new vehicles are you thinking about testing outside of those retail media networks? What's top of mind for you?
Media channels or
media channels, or any areas that you can engage with the consumer, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about unifying kind of our brand marketing standpoint. So all of the activation that we're doing in display, video, search, and social, and unifying that with kind of our direct to consumer communication platforms through email and SMS, and kind of just like unifying that consumer journey. That I think is something that even in the 3 years almost that I've been at Reckitt, even when it was called RB or Reckitt Benckiser, it became about maximizing customer lifetime value and family lifetime value across the entirety of that spectrum. And I think that's obviously every other marketer and brand marketers in a similar boat, as that's being their primary goal. But we still have a far ways to go until it's truly unified.
Great. You made a subtle comment there that is a perfect segue to my next question. Reckitt Benckiser, RB, now Reckitt. Right, the company over the last, for those that of you in the audience that don't know, over the last couple of months, there's been a big change, a big brand identity change, not necessarily an identity, but really to continue to focus on the mantra of to protect, heal, and nurture in the relentless pursuit of a cleaner, healthier world, which could be no more relevant than now, right? A massive rebrand, a massive, logo shift. Yeah. How do you orchestrate something like that as you start to think planning, consumer engagement, activation?
It's a great point, and it is massive, right? Because it takes a brand. Well, even going back pre Reckitt Benckiser, in the 90s, it was Reckitt Coleman, right? Yeah. It was basically a series of acquisitions, and that's kind of, I think, what the company, as many companies today, are based upon, is acquisition after acquisition. So, but just from an overall branding lens, right? I think it makes sense in so many ways. It allows us as an organization globally to have an easily understandable, easily digestible presence and a name. Think about, most consumers on some level know P&G, Unilever, J&J, et cetera, other, CPG manufacturers. RB or Reckitt Benckiser, not so much. So I think that the new branding, the new name, the new logo definitely helps in a lot of ways to create that tactile relationship with the end consumer. Of course, like you mentioned, everyone knows our brands. Everyone knows Lysol. Everyone knows Enfamil. Everyone knows Mucinex and Durex. But now to actually identify those brands under a portfolio name, I think does a lot of good things, but also creates a lot of unique brand equity that probably didn't exist before. And we're only a couple months in.
Great. So we talked a lot about data. We talked a lot about the channels to activate. We talked about your rebrand. Key to all of this is creative and content, right? The ability to engage the consumer with creative and/or content that really pulls them in. How do you coordinate your audience and your data strategy around content and creative? Are there separate teams that you're constantly liaising on with internally, externally? Walk us through that process of making sure that the content, the creative aligns with the audience and the data strategy that you've articulated.
Definitely. And that's also, kind of primary to both my role, but what we're doing as an organization, where we're customizing that creative to the audience, to the campaign, and to the media channel. So like, for example, for some of our brands that have different targets, even sometimes within one brand, that we want to actually have different activations for different segments, right? Not just different demos, but completely different audiences. We then will work both internally with our own creative studios as well as with our activation partners to develop and execute on that custom built creative that speaks directly to that audience. Through obviously like the brand ethos, but also then within the channel that's relevant. Being that I would say the primary touch points, and I mentioned them earlier, are really display, video, search, and social. Very different ways that users are engaging with the brand. So kind of like unifying that, but yet segmenting and have it be relevant, right? Keeping the relevancy there to be able to drive engagement, and then we go back on a bi-weekly basis and kind of evaluate performance, both kind of top level KPIs as well as all the way down the funnel, and then continue to optimize in real time while we're in flight.
Great. So we'll shift gears a little bit to industry challenges and innovation. There's no shortage of changes, right? If there's one thing certain or a couple things certain, it's death, taxes, and change in digital, right? With all the changes that we knew were coming, but are really starting to take more momentum around the deprecation of third-party cookies, IDFA going away, iOS changes, knowing that there's still so much uncertainty in this. But what's top of mind for you? What are you thinking about as you look at that future in a cookieless world? What are you trying to get out in front of?
I mean, one of the things that, and I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday when we connected, basically UID and really connecting identifiers to kind of get ready and prepared to activate in a completely post-cookie world is probably one of those core things that we're focused on doing. Again, it has a timeline to it because we're not at a point where we need to necessarily act on that or nor can act on it fully. And we know it's not going to be the flick of a switch, and we know it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a slow process and a slow migration. So, connecting with all of the connecting our data, right, to all of the entities that we're activating it within, and doing so in a still a privacy compliant way that enables us to start building towards that that UID is really kind of something that we're working towards. It's only May, right, of this year, so I think given we connect again next quarter, the quarter after, it will be a constant evolution, and we will be able to have a lot more progress made in terms of what that tactical kind of process looks like in terms of how we roll it out, testing, and just again making that slow shifts, knowing that at some point in 2022 it is going to be completely phased out.
Right. Great. I've got a couple other questions, but I know we've already had 4 questions come in from the audience, so I want to make sure that we get that. The first one is, what trends in consumer behavior are of particular importance to you and marketers in general now? How are they consuming media differently, and how are they interacting with brands differently?
It's an awesome question. I think like one of the biggest things that sticks out is brands now, users or consumers actually don't just want, but they expect a seamless experience with their brand. And obviously they want to work with brands that they value, what they stand for and their ethos, but then also have a direct communication or direct channel and line of communication into them to be able to, not just make purchases, but, ask questions and to get closer to the brand, right? Like we're living in an era of, I choose my brand because it means something, because I value it, because it means something to me personally, not just because it's a product I use. So I think, everything needs to be looked at through that lens. And then that, of course, then affects media consumption and then the interaction that users have with our media across those different channels. Sure, in the channels, those one-to-one communication channels, email, SMS, etc., we're able to maintain and manage that relationship through that. But then it still has to hold through as it, once we're actually doing one-to-many type of activation and engagement. but there has to be a consistent thread between the two. So I think that's really important to note there.
Great. Now, taking your Reckitt hat off for a second, and putting yourself in your normal day-to-day consumption, how has your consumer behavior changed? How has your interaction with brands changed over the last year?
Personally, yeah, I mean, it's definitely followed a similar trend, because clearly I'm doing more online purchasing, right? And I'm having a lot more deliveries, I think, as we all are, and that's probably not going to change even as we go into this next season, or this next phase of what COVID looks like, where we're all hoping and expecting it's going to be, start to kind of phase itself out. But yet the trends that started over the last 12 to 18 months will clearly not go away. Like I talked about this in panels, even as far back as 6 to 8 to 10 months ago. We knew then that the trends would kind of not change. But to answer your question, EJ, just to kind of on a branding from a brand standpoint, I don't think it's necessarily changed from my own personal perspective, because I'm more of kind of a utilitarian. I don't necessarily feel like I have personal relationships with brands, but I know that most consumers do. So I look at it through the lens of that. And for the brands that I kind of represent and work on, those are obviously of the utmost importance to me, to kind of create and build those kind of channels of communication with. Sorry, as my dog tries to enter the frame.
That's okay. It wouldn't be 2021 or 2020 if there wasn't some distraction on a call, right?
That's something that we've all, I think, become accustomed to, and it definitely brings a little lightheartedness and levity to our day when we can see something like that happen.
100%. I had a call earlier, not to digress, but somebody's children were literally crawling up on the refrigerator behind them, and I was trying to warn them before they fell off. So a couple more questions before we wrap. And we touched on this a little bit, but I think it's good to kind of come back to this just to reiterate. How has the customer journey evolved in recent years? How have the changes in the customer journey impacted your approach to digital media?
So I think like the consumer journey has gotten far more complex. It's gotten far more fragmented and disjointed, but it also is, and that's the challenge, right? But on the positive front, it's also kind of, I think, become easier or more streamlined to manage, because we understand like the different touch points. So I think, that's an interesting question, but how it's affected or impacted our approach to media is, like, as I mentioned, creating a more unified kind of strategy, and one where as users kind of, go down the traditional funnel, they can have an experience that makes sense to them based on their needs, based on their own omnichannel, needs and kind of preferences, but then at the same time, overall have the brand stay consistent to that, right? Like delivering the right message in the right channel that makes sense for that channel, but at the same time have a unified approach where the brand ethos, kind of is consistent.
Great. And it looks like we're just about to get yanked off on stage. I'm going to ask one more question. If you had one wish and you could change one thing about our industry or fix one thing, what would it be?
I should have been quicker on the trigger to that one. One thing to fix about the industry, fragmentation, right? I mean, we're all just, it started with walled gardens, but now everything is very siloed, and that doesn't really help anybody at the end of the day, except for each individual corporation that's has monitoring its own wares. So I think if we could all kind of continue to come together as an industry, unify, work together for better, for kind of the common good, we would all profit. We would all win. And when we have all these companies that are only interested in either how it affects them and their own data and their own ecosystem, that's really the largest obstacle to progress.
Great answer.
Hello. Thank you so much for those words. That was very well said to close in on the panel. Thank you both for joining us, and I can't wait to welcome you back to the stage soon.
Thanks, Ariel. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Be well.
Bye.
So with that, we'll bring on another amazing session for you all today. We will have Josh Blacksmith, the Senior Director of Global Consumer Relationships and Engagement at Kimberly-Clark. He will be giving a keynote for you today, and followed by that keynote, the session will be moderated by Maggie Giancola, the head of CPG strategy at Velasys. So please welcome Josh to the stage and stay tuned for Maggie. Hi, Josh.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining.
Yep, absolutely. Give me just a second here.
No worries.
I will pull up the slides.
Awesome. I'll leave it to you. Have a good time.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
All right, we're off. I just wanted to start. I'll do just a really quick intro, who I am and sort of what I do. As Ariel noted, I am a senior director of global consumer relationships and engagement, bit of a mouthful, at Kimberly-Clark. I work as part of what we call the Digital Marketing COE, Center of Excellence, really focused on driving digital transformation globally across all of our brands, some of which are shown here. It's a group of only about 25 people or so as you can imagine, keeps us all fairly busy. But I've been with Kimberly-Clark for about 2 years. Actually was introduced to Kimberly-Clark through my prior role when I went to the UK to pitch to Kimberly-Clark as an agency lead. I went there to pitch for a first-party data and consumer engagement platform for the Andrex brand. And coming out of that session, learned a lot about Kimberly-Clark's ambition to go after first-party data, and actually had the leadership team reach out to me following that meeting and ask if I'd have interest in coming in-house. And so absolutely jumped at the opportunity to build something from the ground up. Over the last couple decades roughly, I'd worked a number of years in different digital agencies across a number of different verticals, financial services and auto, food and bev, pharma, B2B, tech, retail. But really from day one in my career, always been really focused on data-driven and consumer-centric marketing. So one of the reasons why I was so excited to really make this move into KC is, because I realized that CPGs historically have really, treated consumers like every time they talk with them, it's the first time they've ever talked with them. It's really unfortunate, and it's sort of this short-term memory, really, that wouldn't work in any other relationship. Yet we subject our consumers to this sort of treatment every single day. And so, it's an amazing opportunity to step in at a time when CPGs are now beginning to build their own first-party, environment so that they can understand who their consumers are, what they are and aren't buying, and optimize those experiences. Ultimately, we want to enrich our understanding of the consumer so we can drive a better conversation. We want to build a deeper relationship. So we sort of view, first party as just another data source, if you will, right alongside second and third. Zero party data, I roll into first party. It's more of an explicitly designed, use for first party. But we think about the role that each of these sources of data play in allowing us to drive against our business growth objectives. And each of these, data sources have their own unique, pros and cons, where first party might be more accurate, but certainly creates challenges when it comes to how do we store and manage a secure environment and some of the legislative challenges that come with that. Third party data, right, with the deprecation of third party. I don't think I'm on a call these days where somebody isn't bringing up the impending doom of the deprecation of third party. But even outside of third party cookie, third party data more generally can be found to be less accurate, but it certainly gives us the ability to drive that sort of reach and scale that we're after. I think where we're spending a lot more time, even more so just over the last 6-7 months, is more in the second party data space, viewing that as a great opportunity to replace some of the scale and volume that we're now going to be missing out on in those third party environments. But ultimately, again, it's about using all of this to enrich that consumer understanding, that consumer profile. So there are, countless number of use cases that demonstrate why first-party data matters. Whether you're talking about lookalike audiences to drive penetration or driving engagement, ultimately affinity, loyalty, advocacy, upsell and cross-sell opportunities across a portfolio, or even marketing efficiency and effectiveness. I think the challenge becomes for CPG manufacturers today, how do you demonstrate that this first-party data effort, the ambition behind this matters? And the way that most CPG manufacturers are doing that is by building use cases and then starting to roll those use cases out, because you demonstrate the impact, the effectiveness that this can have in driving business growth. So I'll just give you one quick example of a place that we saw this actually in Germany with our Dry Nights brand, where they had been driving some sampling efforts for roughly 50 weeks. And we stepped in and started having conversations about how we could leverage first party to actually build a custom audience through Ad Studio in Facebook. And in just 2 weeks, we actually drove 70% more samples than had been done the prior 50 weeks. So these are the kinds of massive business improvements we're able to drive by leaning into our data, our new data asset, that we're scaling out around the globe. I think CPG as a whole is really starting to move into this journey of owning that consumer relationship. And so I built this story as something just to sort of help demonstrate the journey that we're all on, sort of from some of the basics into sort of where are we going eventually. I think it starts with just defining what are your first party data goals. Once an organization decides that first party data matters, you need to establish like how much first party data should you be going after? What gives you enough confidence or the ability to leverage that to build your lookalikes and scale the way that you want to in non-first party environments. But one of the first things that we need to do as manufacturers is start to get the risk and regulatory environment well defined. And obviously in my global role, this becomes incredibly complex as you look at some of all the different legislation that's hitting in the different regions and how they're building to ensure that we're protecting the consumer and protecting Kimberly-Clark. But then you also have to make sure that you're getting your data store. This is your world of the known. What are you doing to make sure that your data is actionable, that there's a data environment that allows you to do your own mining and modeling? And then you need to get your identity resolution, which becomes your world of the unknown. This is the world that allows you to help manage your understanding of that consumer across all of your, for example, paid media efforts. So this world of the data store, the identity res, it's the world of known and unknown, and you can't get to orchestration unless you have your data house in order as part of your fundamentals to be able to connect those experiences in a meaningful way. Then you step into more of that change management space, which I say is that space where manufacturers start to recognize the fact that consumers don't experience their brand through paid media alone. If you put yourself in a consumer's shoes, when was the last time you experienced one of your favorite brands through a digital banner? And so recognizing the fact that our consumers are more than just a paid ad that drives them into a retailer to buy, and recognizing that there are moments that we can provide real value becomes incredibly important for us. But when you start to recognize that and start to build plans that deliver on those business growth objectives in an omnichannel or multi-channel way, you also then need to make sure that your brand marketers around the globe are trained in how to execute all of those channels in a most effective way, which requires a significant level of change management. Then you get into connecting what I call mythical silos. Your call center is over here, your sales is over here, your marketing's here. That requires also a significant amount of just understanding the fact that we're all talking to the same consumer, just in perhaps very different and disconnected ways. How do we ensure as manufacturers that we're building that single view of the consumer so that we're not creating a more fragmented experience? Then you step into what I say is the run phase, the realization phase, which is where we see manufacturers moving beyond sort of their brand-centric or product-centric lens and starting to think about, how would I and how should we be operating through the lens of consumer centricity across our entire portfolio? When brands start to toe into this consumer-centric space, organizations start to toe into that, you see them move beyond just the low bar that the risk and regulatory compliance might play from a privacy perspective, and they move more into the space of privacy by design. which means that they're putting emphasis on true trust building and transparency initiatives to make sure that consumers not only can see what's being collected and how, but how is that data being utilized, and give consumers true control over that experience so that they can opt in, out, or down communications. They can choose channel preferences. And so you see a lot of manufacturers starting to move into that space as they move into this phase of consumer centricity. That also opens up, obviously, the opportunity to move beyond the lens of a single siloed brand, but think about the role that every one of your brands might play in any given moment with the consumer, and making sure that you're making the most of every moment you have. And then absolutely thinking about transactional understanding. If you can see what consumers are and aren't buying, what can you do to ensure that you're maximizing that basket opportunity? And ultimately, moving into the orchestration phase, if you're able to recognize those signals and activate off of them and win in those moments, we should be automating those. So every time those signals hit, we have that ongoing stream of comms to drive that business result. So ultimately, when somebody asked me today, why first-party data matters, why are we spending the time that we are going after this ambition? This is not just KC, this is all, we're doing this because it gives us an opportunity to optimize that one-to-one LTV. That is why first party matters to us. So naturally, as you might imagine, as we toe more and more into this space of truly trying to own the consumer relationship, it introduces some interesting points of tension, specifically in terms of how we manage our relationships with our retail partners, our customers, we call them. And so there are three in particular that I'm going to spend the rest of my my time here sort of sharing. The first is this idea that relationships matter, but they matter to manufacturers too, CPG manufacturers as well. Lifetime value, it's about the portfolio. It's not just a siloed brand view. And walled gardens and clean rooms are great, but they also can get really messy when you have so many of them. And so the first one here about relationships mattering, CPGs are beginning to recognize the value of relationships beyond just the next transaction. I think historically, in large part because of mixed models and multi-touch attribution, it's very easy for us to look at paid media doing its job in terms of grabbing consumer attention, pushing them through the funnel, pushing them into retail to close the loop. And you have sort of this self-fulfilling, this model that tells you that just keep putting more money into that paid media effort and you're going to keep driving that next transaction at retail. The challenge is when we don't have any line of sight into that transaction, we lose out on understanding more about our consumers, not just about like the basket opportunities, but also, we miss out on understanding things that can help inform our own innovation. When manufacturers have that visibility, have that line of sight, it gives them the ability to help manage the category overall, even in our relationships with customers. So this is, in large part, as I was noting, it's a result of the fact that we've been overly dependent on paid media to the point that everyone really owns this direct relationship with our consumers today, except for us. So we know consumers are researching and they're making decisions well before that first moment of truth. That first moment of truth may exist in physical retail. The zero moment of truth is sort of where we lean in. Like we need to make sure that we're owning a lot more of that conversation in that zero moment before it moves to a first moment, whether it's a digital or a physical shelf. So the way that manufacturers are starting to respond to this real point of tension is by beginning to invest in more orchestrated experiences beyond paid media. We call them PESO plans, paid and shared owned plans. We realize we do need to make the most of every moment, and we recognize the fact that, our investment can impact paid, owned, and earned. Our investment, if we're doing paid, owned, and earned well, it'll drive shared. I like to joke, if I knew it was going to make something shared or viral, anybody who knew that would live on their own private island somewhere by now, because, we were all sort of after sort of what makes something go viral. But our focus is on really defining the right investment mix of paid, owned, and earned to sort of drive that sharing as an outcome. Our brands today are starting to really ask some of the tough questions, about things like, how much should we be investing in paid search? versus how much should we be investing in non-working content for our website to boost our organic search? And what's the right balance between paid search and organic search? Because we know it's proven that there's a multiplier effect when you manage these channels in an orchestrated way. And so I think, and to take that even one step further, you know, we've actually gone on and built an entire approach to value exchange. And I think we see this happening in the market where you're trying to determine if we're going to ask consumers to provide a level of information to us, we have to ensure that there's mutual value. We have to ensure that we're showing them how we're going to actually benefit them in a more meaningful way as we go forward. So with that sort of a peso focus, manufacturers now can start to extend that conversation into their, you know, into their investments and look at sufficiency in a completely different light. You know, if you know that to drive 1 million consumer actions, these are real engagements, not just impressions, you know, it might cost you $6.5 million using traditional click-through rates to get 1 million clicks on an OLA, but it only costs $1,850 to drive 1 million email clicks using traditional click-through rates or open rates on email. So this is not to say we should be moving all of our paid investment over to email, not at all. This is to say that there's absolutely some level of waste in the system that if we were better able to connect the entire peso experience, we could leverage some of the money spent on OLA to existing consumers that we already have a relationship with, use email in that case instead, and then use that funding to broaden our reach, extend our reach in smarter ways. So we've done some of this work. This is something from a few years ago, just as an example to help land this a little bit, where we sort of view the role of each of our channels and how they play in a journey to move a consumer from Huggies into pull-ups. Where, just as a quick example, we don't want to give them a discount first day to get into pull-ups. We want to start the education process early on through our own relationship and then seed that and complement that with some of our paid media efforts, eventually driving them into purchase at the right point in that journey. The second point of tension that I wanted to share is this one about lifetime value being about the full portfolio, not a single brand silo. And again, when you don't have that view into the total purchase basket, we're really not able to effectively optimize the way that we could. You know, ultimately, you know, if a consumer walks into retail, a lot of it's out of our hands in terms of whether they buy our brand or buy a competitor's brand. You know, but if we actually knew more about that consumer and could manage that transaction a different way, we might, for example, see that a consumer was buying allergy medications on a receipt and know, well, it's really important for us to make sure we get a Kleenex message in front of that consumer in that potential moment. And so again, not having that line of sight into the transaction creates some, you know, some lack of basket optimization opportunities for most manufacturers. What's interesting, you know, I think here is that the pandemic in 2020 really started to, you know, push even our retail partners when it comes to how are they managing last mile delivery. And so I'm sure everybody's seen the rise of Instacart even more so over the last year. There's some interesting tension that's occurring there right now, where a lot of our retail partners who, you know, we don't get to understand our consumer transactional data from, they're now in that exact same boat where Instacart is now the owner of the upstream data flows with consumers, and they know what consumers are buying, what they're buying, and from whom. And so it starts to create some tension now between retailers and Instacart when it comes to that last mile delivery. So it's clearly a space everybody's trying to figure out. So how are manufacturers responding to this? I'll tell you two ways. First, it's through receipt scan partnerships. We have a great partnership with Fetch Rewards. Through that partnership, we get full receipt scan data. We understand at the one-to-one level, everything that's in the basket, who they're buying from. Gives us the ability to start to understand individual share of requirement, start to make moves in and out of Fetch, frankly, because we have a first-party implicit opt-in from these consumers. So it allows us to manage a relationship with an individual, either inside of Fetch or outside, to drive against the growth objectives we have. This has proven so successful for us in the US that we've even migrated our own rewards program to be integrated, Huggies Rewards, to be fully integrated into Fetch. It's an amazing partnership that we realized provides incremental value for our consumers by giving our consumers more ability to redeem for rewards beyond just our products, but being able to leverage the entire, suite of partners that Fetch already works with. The other space that manufacturers are starting to respond to here is by building their own DTCs, and this can get really controversial. And there is a lot of discussion about sort of the upside opportunity here. The reality is, last year, I don't think I could go to more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, without seeing another CPG manufacturer standing up a new D2C. And so the focus that most of us have right now is on, first of all, just identifying the commercial opportunity, defining our value prop, and what is our right to win in that space, making sure that we're managing channel conflict and ensuring that the learnings that we get can be a win-win. It gives us an incremental value opportunity, but also allows us to build a story that we can bring back to some of our retail partners who we depend on in a lot of cases to drive the scale that we're after. So the third point of attention that I'll call out is walled gardens and clean rooms. These are super appealing, very much needed. It gives us the reach, it gives us, with the clean rooms, the ability to understand the effectiveness of what we're doing within those walls. The challenge is it's not just the Facebooks and Googles today, but a lot of our retail partners are essentially operating as their own walled gardens as well. So while there's so much opportunity for us to be able to optimize within those environments, the unfortunate reality is that these gardens are now essentially the new data silo. There's a total lack of ability for us to actually pull anything out at the one-to-one level. We can get audience reads again through the clean rooms. But when we need to stand up these clean rooms inside every single garden to understand our efforts, we just end up with a very fractured view, a fragmented view of the consumer that makes it really hard as a manufacturer to be able to effectively manage frequency, for example. So the way manufacturers are starting to respond to this is by, bringing their own identity solutions in-house and starting to think through how do they strategically deploy audiences in the most effective way. And so a quick example here might be if I have my known world and my unknown world identified, as I showed you in that earlier map, I can choose to deploy a communication through an OLA. I can bring a consumer in, onboard them, push out an audience, and ensure that a consumer gets an impression day 1. Day 5, I can then choose that exact same consumer to receive an email. And then based on what they click in that email, I can then choose how to deploy that individual as an audience on day 7 through Facebook. So truly starting to build a business logic layer, a business rules layer that lives above the known and unknown environments, gives us the ability to then manage optimal paths, digital paths to purchase, gives us the ability to really truly migrate consumers along a journey that results in the right outcome. So I'll just close by saying I believe the best news is that we're seeing data, technology, and creative come together in a way like never before to truly enable a new consumer experience, and a consumer experience that really does start to create a win-win opportunity for both the manufacturers and our retail partners. The key here is that we build transparency and trust in our partnerships, and I think we're starting to see a lot of that just by the nature of the fact that these clean rooms are being set up, because there is a desire to make sure that we're leveraging these platforms to drive the most meaningful outcome, not just for us, but for the manufacturer as well. And so I think what I would leave everybody with is that there is a world, and we're seeing this through different technology partnerships as well. There's a world where everyone can win, as long as we continue to remain focused on collaborating to build richer consumer experiences, realizing the consumer at the end of the day is truly in control. So I will stop my sharing there. And I believe Maggie was going to come on.
Hey, Josh.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
Hey, I wanted to say great job. That was a fantastic presentation. There was there's so many awesome insights and nuggets in there. And I know we've got about 15 minutes to chat, and there was way too much to dive into. So you and I will definitely have to regroup, but thank you for that thoughtful presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So for the greater audience, I am Maggie Giancola. I am head of CPG and NCH strategy here at Velasys. And for those of you that might be joining us a little late, just to reintroduce the fantastic Josh Blacksmith, Senior Director of Global Consumer Relationships and Engagement at Kimberly-Clark, who just took us through a fantastic presentation of the world that's evolving around us and how that impacts the way we think about consumer engagement and the entire journey to purchase. So thanks again, Josh, for that. So Josh, right out of the gate, one of the things that stuck out to me right from the very beginning is your point around a core principle being data-driven, consumer-centric marketing. And it's music to my ears because that is 100% what we are focused on at Velasys as well. Everything, as you and I have spoken about, everything that we do here at Velasys is rooted in our consumer graph. And our number one most important tentacle of our business model is to understand who consumers are, because as you and I have spoken about, that understanding enables us to have the most thoughtful path to purchase and truly engage in the right ways. And what's so interesting as we think about CRM and first party, that's been around for a while. And to your point, as you shared, it's an evolving strategy, but a core principle behind truly understanding this motivation to buy. There has been a ton that has changed in the last year and a half for us personally and professionally. Disconnectivity due to the growth of e-commerce. We think about the shift in consumer behavior, resurgence of the mailbox with people being home. There's a multitude of trends. I'm just so curious to know from your perspective, when you think about specifically the last year and the trends that have taken place, how has that put renewed sense of energy behind first, second, third, zero-party data, and how you're thinking about using that to shift consumer behavior?
Yeah, I think I'd say it accelerated our ambition. I think that the vision was there, but I think the urgency behind being able to have a channel to be able to deploy. I think everybody was witness to the panic buying that happened in our categories, in our toilet tissue categories last year, and I think it started to demonstrate the importance of ensuring that you have the ability to not only manage that fulfillment mechanism through your own channel, but through your retail partner channels as well. So I would say that the place that we've probably, I would say, leaned in a little bit differently over the last year has been to sort of lean even more so into our brand purpose. To think a little bit more about how do we ensure that our brands can stand for something more than just our functional product attributes, and ensuring that we're leaning into that purpose in a way that starts to unlock conversations that we can have with our consumers in a way that's different. If you think about who really wants to have like a relationship with a toilet paper brand, when you think about like your purpose, and sort of where we push with that brand around care down there, and the idea of caring, extending that purpose into an engagement, a relationship that can take it to a different level, has been everything for us. And I think that we still have, areas of opportunity to continue to push and grow in that space. But I've seen that grow in a significant way and become sort of a focal point for us over the last year, just given all of the different things that we're hitting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love that care down there example, because it touches on, I have so much fascination with consumer psychology, particularly looking at the last year and what's shown up. And a key piece is this whole concept of empowerment, right? Particularly in light of so many of these social and injustice issues that we've been faced with, namely in the last year. I have a story. People have found their voice and they have found different ways to action that voice. And that has put a heightened sense around the whole concept of value, right? And in the CPG world, in our world, value has oftentimes meant sense off, promotions and things of that nature. But it's changing the game and how we think about the term value. And you touched on this in your presentation. Consumers care about what brands stand for. They're open to buying differently through different motivation. And it's just really interesting to think about how you're actioning that with the Care Down There campaign. And I'm curious, kind of building on this concept of heightened sense of around value, what else are you thinking about in that vein? And how are you thinking about pivoting and iterating?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've built a value exchange framework that we use. And it's really meant to help ensure that as we're going to be building consumer facing experiences, that we're creating something that, will actually drive the appropriate level of, engagement. And so we built this through the lens of 4 real pillars. One is around utility, which can be very broad in terms of its interpretation, but that's intended to be that way. Community, exclusivity, and economic incentives. And so those are sort of our 4 pillars that as we're putting anything into the market, particularly in this sort of one-to-one space, we're wanting to make sure that we're finding ways to deliver on that. And so I would say that it's very easy for any CPG manufacturer, for any brand, frankly, to throw an incentive into market and to drive a short-term result. And so we're very quick to acknowledge the fact that while that might be the right sort of acquisition mechanic to bring a new consumer into a brand, we very quickly want to move that consumer into some of our other value levers so that they find ways to engage in a deeper way with us. So how quickly can we move beyond the incentives and move into unlocking utility or finding ways to connect a consumer into a broader community that is experiencing some of the same things they are, whether it's the mom community or whatever. And then moving consumers into this belief or feeling of the fact that we value them, and so we're creating exclusive experiences for them in some way. So that's been really, I would say, really important for us as we've thought about even moving beyond some of the things that we've been doing from a brand purpose perspective.
That's interesting. It's so interesting to think about that journey as you lay that out, right? And you're almost suggesting what could have been a tried and true historical promotion or incentive in the CPG world, thinking about it less as a commodity, the way maybe historically it has been, take coupons, for example, and more about a change agent. And how does it become a carrot or an enabler to capture data? How does it become an opportunity to then engage them differently? Does that look like a higher value coupon as you start to see these trends that could, in theory, change some tried and true tactics CPGs have relied on for many years when you just look at them through a little bit of a different lens in light of some of these broader goals? It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
And I think we're also in the space of sort of owning the consumer relationship. We're starting to get, we want to become more sophisticated, right? And thinking about when we're deploying those incentives. I don't think that it's in anyone's best interest. It's definitely not in the manufacturer's best interest to just sort of blanket a market
right.
with an offer. And so having that rich understanding of which offer might be right for a consumer based on their, price sensitivity and consumption modeling that we might do. And understanding if it should be $1 off of 4 packs or $1 off of 1 pack to drive that desired outcome. But those are the kinds of spaces as you get into this transactional space and you really start to understand, it gives you the ability to sort of manage with a lot more, meaning and to drive the best result. So, yeah.
So in that vein of thought, going all the way to the end of the funnel, is it safe to say that KPIs could also change as we think about, I'm hearing you talk and I'm thinking, well, could it become more about owned brand site traffic? Right? When you're trying to create and curate that connectivity, does that become more important? Obviously, conversion is always going to be important. It's a key metric, but does it start to change the way that you as the manufacturer view that funnel and what truly are the right KPIs?
Yeah, it's interesting because I sometimes will say that I don't know that the funnel exists anymore. I know that's everybody has been saying that for years, but when I say that, what I specifically mean is that I find times where you're going to drive awareness of your product in a category, consideration, purchase, advocacy. You're going to drive the full funnel in a matter of a minute and a half. If you have the right experience in market and you happen to be introducing your product in a moment of need, right? And so it's not to say that the funnel is dead. It's meant to say that it's definitely accelerated. Because there's so much information at every consumer's fingertips today you can go from not even having any idea that there's a solution that might meet your need to buying it and saying it's the best thing ever in a minute and a half, you know?
Right.
Yeah, so I would say that we're definitely looking at sort of how do we measure success. To your point, you know, it has to be delivering on our business growth. But ultimately, we are looking for indicators that demonstrate that demonstrate that this is something that's driving that ultimate outcome, that conversion event. And so we have to take steps beyond, like I was saying, our mixed models and MTAs. We have to look at things like a CX score, you know, and how do we actually make a CX score, you know, not just another NPS, but something that's more meaningful, that actually incorporates different levers that we can adjust up or down based on what we're trying to achieve. And so we're having real conversations about the role of that sort of view right alongside an ROI as some of our top metrics that we evaluate.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because when you start to think about all of these shifts and changes, it does impact the entire process and the entire funnel. So I appreciate that insight. Yeah. I do want to make sure I leave a few questions for the audience. I feel like I could talk to you all day though about this topic. So thank you for the continued insight and dialogue. Yeah. From the audience, so what innovations and technologies are you utilizing to execute your strategies, and how has that changed again in the last year?
Yeah. In the last year, I would say, I'll go back just a little further. In the last 2 years that I've been with KC, I've seen us move from a data environment that had a 7-day lag on data refresh for our own consumers into a data environment that we just launched earlier this year, where it's near real time, at least daily refreshes, has its own environment to enable modeling, data mining. I've also seen us in the last year make a commitment to an identity resolution provider. We, as an organization, KC, we've made an investment in an enterprise tool that gives us the ability to connect a lot of our sort of outbound marketing, traditional silos. And so some of that, by bringing the technology together, starts to immediately help us when it comes to connecting our call center, for example, into our marketing cloud. For the first time, if we've got a consumer who is complaining, we have an easier ability to now suppress that consumer from receiving any marketing communications for a couple of weeks. So one of the one technology I think I'll call out, other than the couple that I already called out, like Fetch and some of the work we're doing with them, we've started to work with a company called Shoppable, which has been interesting for us because it totally lives in that win-win space between us and retail. It's in the D2C sort of space. It gives us the ability to actually understand what purchases are actually happening because we manage the transaction on our own .coms. And we can collect first-party data in that experience. It operates by having real-time APIs from most of the major retailers. Amazon's not in there, but the other retailers have real-time APIs for product and pricing. And so consumers can literally go into this unit in our owned experiences now and shop for the products they want and understand the price across the different retailers and choose to buy what they want and transact completely in our environment. We win because we know the conversion event happened. Retailer wins because ultimately they still get all the transaction detail and fulfill. And so this is like the world of the win-win, and where I think technology is going to continue to push and take us to continue to create this environment where everybody wins. So
I love that. Yeah. That's interesting. Hi, Ariel. I'm assuming you're here because we're out of time.
Yes. Is there any closing thoughts you'd like to part on to our audience?
I do have one last question, Josh. As you think of the now and you think of the future, whether that's 6 months or 6 years from now, when you think of the now and wanting to own this consumer and all the levers and insights you have about them today, and you think about the future, what would be the one thing, data set, a lens of the consumer, a technology, the one thing that you would hope to have in your arsenal as you think about the future that you don't have today?
Yeah, I love that. I wish there were a silver bullet for orchestration. I think I'd be shocked if this wasn't a common theme. I think it's very easy in theory to establish business rules and manage a relationship at the one-to-one level. And think about that example that I gave, sort of the theoretical example. It gets very challenging when it comes to sort of the cost implications of standing that environment up and then supporting the creative to sort of deliver that experience, understanding if it wins by paying for the right measurement methodology behind it. So ultimately, we're sort of after that orchestration and having conversations with some different providers in the space to make sure that we're enabling our day-to-day brand managers to be more hands-on keyboard, able to sort of build these true journeys, end-to-end journeys across known and unknown environments in a way that puts power into their hands, in a way that they don't have to wait a week and pay a bunch of money to sort of have to sort of drive that sort of outcome, but rather can more actively sort of drive that. So that's the thing we're after, and hopefully we find something close.
I hope for that too. It's an excellent way to kind of close this out, to think about where we need to focus as we move into the future. And thank you again for such an awesome presentation and a wonderful conversation. It was a true pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the time.
Echoing Maggie's thoughts here, such a pleasure to have you both, and I cannot wait to see you both back on the stage soon. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
With that, I will bring on our next speaker. Get ready for a true treat. We have Adam Hattie, who's the Vice President of Marketing at Current, moderated by Eric DeHaan, the CEO at Open Influence. So Adam Hattie is an incredible influencer marketer, so get ready. Hi, Adam.
Hello. I don't think I've ever been introduced as a treat before. That is very generous.
I am so excited for this session. I've learned so much about you from your counterparts at work. So I'm going to leave it to Eric to kick it off.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Awesome. Well, I guess to kick things off, Adam, why don't we just dive in and talk about Current? There's so many different, finance solutions out there. There are a lot of different opportunities. What is Current? What makes it special?
Yeah, certainly. Well, for one, we're here in New York. Started about 6 years ago in downtown Manhattan, and we're banking for people who are overlooked by traditional banks, right? Specifically, what that means is that traditional banking, right, and the traditional banking business model is built on accumulating assets, right? And then loaning out those assets and or selling you a credit card or mortgage. That's essentially how they make money. The problem with that business model is that half of this country is not there, right? Especially if you're young, you're nowhere near, a mortgage and may not have the credit score for the credit card. But if you're paycheck to paycheck, you're definitely not there, right? You literally, by definition, don't have assets for the bank to loan out. So in return, traditional banks charge you all types of terrible fees to at least try and break even on service, because ultimately, traditional banking is an extremely expensive service, right? I'm here in the city, and there's a bank on every single corner with like a bank vault worth of cash with security locks and security systems, and take away all that, and even just the legacy processing of all this. It's a little bit crazy, right? So enter in Current, we're obviously far more cost efficient than that, right? We're online only, and we've actually built our own banking infrastructure from the ground up. It's part of why this company is 6 years old, but you might only be hearing about us now. And so with that, it gives us far greater flexibility to provide financial products and a brand that's relevant to that audience, right? To that other half of America, to young folks, to folks who are paycheck to paycheck, that can really, inspire them, motivate them, and give them the tools to improve their financial outcomes.
Yeah, and you mentioned, right, this idea of a lot of young people out there being able to access your service, your offering. Can you talk to us a little bit about the difference between Gen Z and Gen Y and what you're seeing?
Yeah, certainly. So we skew fairly young, right? We're really onboarding people into the financial system. about half of our customers today were actually their first bank account. So that means, you know, Gen Z, you know, young millennial, and their needs are very different from previous generations. Their expectations are very different from previous generations. And then how to actually reach them, where they spend their time, is very different from previous generations. I think now more than ever, you know, and it's talked about a lot over the last several years, kind of like the bubbles that we live in, but in ways in which that can manifest itself. I like to think of really, there's never been another time in history where, you know, a top 5 most important celebrity to a 25-year-old would just otherwise not be known to a 35-year-old, you know, and or 45-year-old, right? And we're actually living in that world today, right? Like, and I think that's really unique. And this applies to everything, right? We see this in politics, we see this in news, we see this across the board, where it's like, how did you never hear about this thing? And it's kind of a function of all this information being delivered to us via algorithms. But it means you really need to take a different approach with individual audiences, particularly by age. And so for us, right, if you just go to current.com, it'll hit you in the face pretty quickly that we are, you know, we're of a certain generation, and we don't look what you might expect a bank to look like, because ultimately we're not a bank. We're financial technology. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Yeah, and you touched on something around the influencer piece that I want to address later, which is awesome. I think, you know, I would love to dive into around, you know, when people come to your site, right, first impression, I guess, what's your biggest challenge with engaging consumers and acquiring new customers?
Well, it's a big ask, what we're asking for. You know, our core KPI, what we're driving for, the thing that we need from our customers to give them the most amount of value back is their direct deposit, their paycheck. And again, if you're talking about somebody who's young and you're talking about somebody who's paycheck to paycheck, that's a huge ask, right? If you're paycheck to paycheck and I'm asking for your paycheck, that means I'm asking for all of your money, right? That's no small thing. So what we have is a very long consideration phase, right? And that's, you know, from both before you install the app when we're mobile only or sign up, and after. So, you know, a challenge for us is making sure that on all the different touch points that a user may have, that it's all consistent in telling one narrative, ideally in kind of an order of operations that makes sense for people, that gets people more comfortable, that builds trust. Because ultimately, I'm really proud of what we built and I'm really proud of who we are. But for most of this country hasn't heard of us yet, right? I can sit here and shit on Wells Fargo all day for all of their terrible practices, but they're around the corner and they've been there for the last 50 years. If something doesn't work, if my money isn't there, I can go yell at somebody, right? We don't have that as a new brand, as an online only brand. So we have to overcome a little bit of that trust. So that's certainly a challenge that we're quickly addressing.
Yeah, and I love the sort of comparison to that physical space, right? When you look at like bank buildings, they often, you know, choose buildings like big granite foundations or facades, so it feels like something stable in there.
Yeah, somebody's paying for that, by the way.
Exactly. Definitely. And so, you know, when we're looking at, you know, Gen Z, millennials kind of is the hybrid term we like to use. You know, what are the channels you're looking for to build that trust? And like, what are some of the tactics you use specifically to build that trust and overcome that barrier with the fact that, you know, you're not across the street from them. They're not driving by or walking by, you know, your building or your storefront on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, I think for one, it's not an individual channel and it can't be, right? And so we're operating across, you know, a wide spectrum of everything from offline channels to your traditional digital channels, you know, your TV, I mean, and you alluded to it earlier, working with influencers on the social channels, because ultimately, and those are really, really important, because if you talk about, you know, where people spend their time, where people spend their attention, give their attention in today's world, so much of it is on social for that generation. That's definitely a big focus of ours.
Yep, yep. And with TV, like how are you utilizing TV and TV ads? Is the messaging different at all? Are you appealing to you know, a different use case, slightly different audience? Like how does that fit into the mix when it comes to Gen Z?
Yeah, it's with TV, it's certainly a little bit of an older audience that you're going to find on there, particularly on linear, right? But we are who we are, and so our messaging needs to adapt, but you know, still operate within our overall strategy. So we've done some pretty cool stuff on TV, and a lot of what we've put on there. In fact, we're running a commercial right now that features a TikToker that we've worked with, and even the interface of the commercial, it emulates that of TikTok, right? And this is not what you would expect to find on TV. It's very digitally native ad, right? With a TikToker as the hero. And so when you know, our goal is that you know, when you watch this, it stands out, you know, and actually the contrast of, hey, wait, this is like, you know, this is a meme, this doesn't belong on TV, is kind of what we're going for. And that's not just with TV, it's with we've got, you know, actually some specific meme style ads live here in New York, which again, it's kind of you know, I think the juxtaposition of like very contemporary, very modern messaging on traditional media is something that captures people's attention.
That's awesome. And I think you know, you touched on it too with this, but using a TikToker for TV, right? Would love to, you know, just to hear why influencers and you know, why do you see influencer marketing as a great starting point? I know you touched upon it a little bit at the beginning, but would love to get a deeper take from you on that. Yeah.
Well, look, you know, and I should clarify a little bit with the word influencer, because it can end up meaning a lot of things. But for us, really, when I say influencer, I'm talking about YouTubers, creators, TikTokers, some folks on Instagram, Twitch streamers, all those. And these are the most relevant and most important celebrities for a younger generation, right? If you're Gen Z, or if you're a young millennial, names like Mr. Beast, those are the most important people in you know, famous people in their lives. So when it comes to grabbing people's attention, that's who we would flock to, right? I'm a little bit older. Maybe if you wanted to target me, you would get like LeBron James or something like that. But for a younger generation, it certainly starts with influencers. And it's been part of our core strategy for a long time here at Current. I mean, personally, you know, I've been with the company for a little over 2 years, but I've worked in the influencer space for nearly a decade now. I kind of fell into it by accident before it was even called influencer marketing, right? This was I was working on a soccer app at the time, and I was like, hey, can I pay these people who play FIFA on YouTube and upload it to talk about our app? Turns out, yes, is the answer. And you know, fast forward quite a bit, and here we are. But it's if you want to talk about, you know, that trust process and establishing trust, the younger generation is very skeptical, and rightfully so, of your average Facebook ad, right? There's an understanding that anybody can essentially do this. Now, when you talk about some offline media, you get past that a little bit, right? There is a little bit of clout that comes with operating on other channels, that people will be like, okay, well, they must be, you know, a little bit more legit. But the problem with those channels can sometimes be, well, it's not really for me, right? And maybe you lose a little bit of relevance. So with influencers, we get it all. right? We get the relevance, we get the trust, we get the endorsement, and increasingly it's actually much more than just an acquisition strategy or a marketing strategy. I mean, certainly from an acquisition standpoint, right? If you put out a video or a post or whatever, it's reaching millions of people, there's an acquisition play there. Obviously a brand play as well. For us, a content play, and again, increasingly a product play as well. I mean, if I'll bring Mr. Beast up as an example, because we just worked with Mr. Beast, and I don't know, a lot of listeners here might have no idea who Mr. Beast is, which would only go to the point I was making a few minutes ago. But Mr. Beast is a YouTuber, really the biggest one out there. The guy's got 60 million subs. He's blown up like crazy over the last 4 years. And his entire brand is built largely on his philanthropy. He gives away a ton of money, mostly to people in his videos. That's the actual content, right? And so I remember, 4 years ago, working with this guy, giving, $10,000 to a homeless person. It was kind of his first foray into this. I sponsored that video, and it like blew up, and we were like, "Whoa, this is like a cool thing. Let's try this again." We did it with pizza delivery folks. We did it with Twitch streamers, yada yada yada. Fast forward, a few years, and the guy's giving away millions and millions of dollars. And so we worked with him on a video where it was actually his biggest fan giveaway ever, right? And so he gave away it's $100,000 to up to 100,000 fans, right? And it's pretty cool because there's no actual practical means to be able to do that, right? Like, how do you give 100,000 people money as a YouTuber? There's a ton of ways to get money from 100,000 people, right? There's a million platforms out there that kind of empower that, but the inverse, not so much. And so that's been pretty cool, because we're essentially a tool for him to engage with his fans more than we are just a sponsor that could otherwise be, any other company. And then the actual product experience is tailored to his fans, right? And we have, we have a point system, which is pretty interesting, right? You're used to earning points if you spend on a credit card, but in the debit world, it doesn't really exist. But we have the ability to earn points on your debit card. And whereas, an older generation is always excited to use their points on maybe like travel, or maybe like a fancy dinner reservation that's exclusive, or, whatever VIP tickets to some concert or event or art show. That's the stuff at least I get served from American Express or Chase. For a younger generation, it's different, right? And so in our points store, we actually have an exclusive merch. So we have a Current by Mr. Beast hoodie that you can get with your points, right? And you get points just for connecting your direct deposit. So there's this entire positive flywheel that exists there, where it's like our goal is to convince customers and members to trust us with their money. If they trust us with their money, we can then exchange value back. How do we build that trust? We do it with influencers, and then we tie back the relevancy of those influencers with the benefits in our actual product. And so again, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's very rewarding.
That's awesome. And funny note, Adam, your story of the soccer app being sort of the nexus into the influencer space, it feels so close to home for me. I literally started an app and was looking for a way to market it. And at the time, we're like, okay, well, we don't have the budgets for big ad agencies. We obviously can't afford a celebrity. What are we going to do? And it was just like, well, we see this person on Instagram with 15,000, 20,000 followers, and this person on Twitter. Let's just shoot them a DM and see if they'll promote it. And, and these were people that were relevant to us. And we said, okay, let's see. And that was sort of that step. And I think what you touched on was really interesting, which is, and I think it took time for a lot of people in, for the previous generations to really understand, but like traditional celebrities aren't nearly as relevant as a lot of the influencers that we see, or even like creators, right? To pick a broader or kind of more specific term for this, right? you know, and people are really customizing who they're following, who they're looking at. There's so many different types of creators and influencers out there in all sorts of genres, from beekeepers to to chefs, which is obviously a big category, the finance influencers, the astrophysics. So you really have it all. And I think you touched on something really powerful, which is that level of trust. But also, it sounds like you're competing with the Wells Fargos of the world. Instead of having that brick and mortar presence, you're having that digital real estate with that endorsement. And I really want to come back to how you're integrating influencers, right? I think the merch is fascinating, and how these perks sort of differ from the MasterCards and the Visas of the world that are focused, we talked about this the other day, right? But on the dining experiences and whatnot, and you're really focused on what people care about that follow influencers. So you're integrating them on your site. You talked about how you integrated them on television. I guess, can you speak a little bit more to the other ways you're integrating these partnerships and dive a little bit deeper there? It's super interesting.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, and you mentioned kind of the brick and mortar locations. Banking historically has been driven by community, right? You have your community banks, your local banks, your regional banks, and they've kind of grown out of that. And community is still really important. It's just that what's changed is the definition of community, right? It used to be, folks would share values, yes, but it was largely driven by, we all live in the same place, right? It's my physical location. That's what you would go with. That's changed, right? As over the last few decades, more and more, I'm part of a global community, right? I'm a Knicks fan. I have a Knicks fan fandom communities online, right, which span around the world. I might be a Star Wars fan, and that's what defines me. I may be part of a subreddit that goes deep into any number of categories, and that's the community I feel attachment to. And so these communities, in many cases, are being led by these creators, led by these influencers, right? And so we're still working on that basis. And so an example of that would be, we actually have a series called The Hustle, in which we profile a number of the creators that we've worked with, and we go behind the scenes. And so now we've actually flipped the equation a little bit. So it's not just, hey, we are using this influencer to promote us, right? And it's not just like a one-way relationship. We're actually producing content, and we're flying places where we're shooting stuff. We're creating exclusive content that exists on our platform for their fans, right? For their communities. So we have stuff that's relevant for them there, and we're doing so by like enabling these things, right? The last thing I would ever want to be is just like a waste of somebody's time, right? And Current to be known as, Current had a 30-second promo or a 60-second promo, and they just like wasted 60 seconds of my time. It's a lot of what you'll see in like a podcast, for example. A poorly executed podcast read, I should say, is just like, there goes my time. The best ones, right, you want to listen to because it's good content. And it's like, because of this piece of content, because of this brand, I'm able to do this, right? Red Bull has done an incredible job of this within like the extreme sporting place, right? Like, that, like, who paid for this thing? How is this cool, awesome video I'm watching of this person gliding by a mountain possible? It's possible because of Red Bull. And so you might have, even if you don't drink energy drinks at all, you still have a positive affinity to Red Bull, right? And if Red Bull were to come out with a product for you, you would certainly be primed to consume it, right? And so being associated with great moments and being a brand sponsor that's enabling those great moments is very much part of our goal with our influencer strategy. And so bringing in content and kind of giving them the tools to do stuff that might be beyond their average content is always kind of where we want to be.
And I really want to highlight what you called out, which is this exchange of value, right? Like you want to provide consumers, potential customers, whoever, with content that they're actually going to value. And I think so many brands that I've seen, they look at it saying, okay, I'm going to send a bunch of my product to influencers. I'm going to have them post. Okay, great. I'm going to get the impressions. I'm going to look at those impressions, and that's it. But you see a lot of ads, whether it be on YouTube where they're integrated pieces of content or poorly executed, dedicated pieces of content that are being created where it's like, I don't feel that connection. I just feel like I'm watching an ad. And I think in today's world, people just have so much choice of the information they're going to consume. I mean, you skip ads, right? You'll pay a premium to not watch an ad before a show or a series, right? We could ignore them. And so I think that's really the mindset that you called out that I want to highlight, is really looking at content creation as this exchange of value. And I love the fact that you guys are creating your own content and your own really hub and in an integrated approach where it's almost as if you're building almost like a virtual influencer in yourselves with this. And also, I'm sure that's helping quite a bit for trust. Maybe can you talk a little bit about how you're using content, specifically, not just from an awareness standpoint, but what kind of content are you sharing to further that trust hurdle that comes with with the business you're in?
Yeah, I'd say increasingly Current has become a bit of a character on its own. So maybe not quite an influencer, but we play a character, we play a role within the overall story of the creator ecosystem. So if you go can check out our TikTok. Our TikTok has a bunch of great examples of this, where it's not about, and really the creators we work on TikTok, like you just can't put bad content on TikTok and succeed. It's like on other platforms, right? I kind of shit on some podcast feeds earlier, but you can certainly do it on YouTube as well. You can get away with a bad 60 seconds on YouTube if it's surrounded by good enough content. You can't get away with that on TikTok. You put something that's boring or subpar or doesn't fit or stale or you name it, it's just not going to get any impressions, right? It's going to fall flat and you will have overpaid and everybody's lost, right? The creator you worked with lost because they sold out and delivered bad content and kind of broke their promise to all the folks who decided to follow them. You've lost, right? Because you're not getting the impressions. And then the select few fans who did see the content, you wasted their time. So you can't really take that approach. You shouldn't take that approach anywhere. You definitely can't get away with it on TikTok. So on TikTok, you have to balance, okay, how do I deliver a message? How do I deliver value within the context of making this entertaining? And actually TikTok, a lot of people outside of TikTok will tend to think, oh, TikTok is like, people dancing or people, just like silly, shallow content. But actually a lot of people go to TikTok for information, right? And you learn things, and it's incredible what you can learn in 20 seconds, in 60 seconds. And now I think up to maybe 3 minutes last time I checked, something like that, right? Like you can and get a ton of information. So people are looking and are open to that on TikTok as a platform. And it can be really informative. But no one's going on there for a research project, right? So you have to frame it in a way that's still providing entertainment and valuable content. And so maybe that is a dance. I don't want to, there's nothing against dancing TikTok. But there's lots of, we have a lot of flexibility in the way that you can convey that messaging.
No, I agree 100%. Like I think that was sort of the understanding, like, oh, you have some music, everyone must just be dancing and creating lip syncing and dancing videos, right? And back in the Musical.ly days, I think that was kind of true, right? But with TikTok, I mean, it's so easy to get sucked into a rabbit hole where you're just getting finance tips, or you're getting health tips, or you have people teaching about meditation tricks or mental tricks. It just really there's a rabbit hole for anything. And I think that the difference with TikTok, maybe some other platforms, is TikTok is really a discovery platform. And so when you're creating that content, you have half a second before someone decides like whether they're going to keep watching or they're going to just keep swiping, keep looking. But I've definitely seen a huge emergence of so many different categories and so many different genres of information that I would not have thought would have emerged from the platform. So it's a great call out. I want to pivot a little bit and dive into the content itself. So we talked about adding value and the importance of that exchange. Of course, we're in this content economy, right, where we're trading content for people's attention, and it has to be valuable. While you're partnering with creators, with influencers, the question I have for you is, how do you approach the creative process itself? Like, how much of that, creative guideline for the content do you handle? How much do you hand off to the influencer? And then how do you balance that to make sure you have the right sort of mix of authenticity, but you're getting your brand message across?
It's a bit challenging. It's not something that's easy, and not something that I would say we like fixed one day and then it was done. It's constantly something we're adapting, right? Because you want in any brand marketing, you certainly want your message out there, right? And you want your brand to be perceived in a cohesive way. And one individual piece of content that might be really great but doesn't align with your brand strategy can actually be pretty counterproductive, right? Even if it on its own it's a great thing. So that's a bit of a challenge. However, we in a perfect world, I would say all the creators that we work with would have a perfect understanding of what Current is, what our product is, what our brand strategy is. And then we would have no say in what they actually do. Right? And I mean that in that it's really important that they understand that because ultimately they're the creative geniuses, right? They understand their audience better than anybody else. So as long as our goals are aligned and they understand what we are, 10 times out of 10, I'm going to trust their judgment on the best way to deliver that. And so and again, that's challenging because it's hard. If I were to give somebody a script, that's easy, and there's a level of certainty around that. But if that's your goal, then it's just a total misuse of influencers, right? And that should not be the channel on which you're operating for that. And so you have to balance this a little bit. And the only way I've found to be able to do it is through hard work. And effort, and at the end of the day, it's manual, and it involves a lot of relationship building and time, but then it pays off, right? And it pays off long term and allows you to have longer term engagements with creators who really believe in what you are and really understand what you are and your long term goals, and are asking you, hey, was this successful? Did this work out right? What can I do next time? But that's, again, I'd be lying if I said we're able to execute that, on 100% of our campaigns, because the truth is, sometimes that doesn't work out. And so it's challenging, but it's really, really important. But I'd say, I'd say more so than worrying about, a creator putting out a message that's not on brand or not aligned with the brand strategy. I'd say 9 times out of 10, what I see is the opposite. Is that yes, the creator is, reading the script or reading the talking points, and that's the problem is with brands not giving them enough creative freedom to do what they do best, right? When it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, which is great content.
Yep. And can you share a little bit of like the specific sort of pitfalls that some brands can expect in terms of like actually executing it, right? So you go through the creative briefing process, you send through something very thorough, you hope it kind of gives enough freedom for them to kind of take it and run with it. But then can you talk through some of those pitfalls, just for, for the audience listeners here to look out for, and maybe like some of the recommendations you have and you've learned throughout the course of your career and your time with Current, and scaling that?
Yeah, well, I'd say I'd start with the fact that you're going to need buy-in. It's really going to be important to get buy-in within the entire org, because it can be challenging sometimes because you are giving up some control, right? On your own operated media, you're 100% you. It's your voice, your message, your everything, and so it's kind of easy to align people around that. You're giving up control when you're working with creators, and there's a balance there. But if you don't have buy-in, and when I say buy-in, I don't just mean from like the higher ups or it mean across the organization. Because there'll be manifestations in this for engineers, for product folks, for CS folks, for finance folks across the board. You really buy-in is really important. And so once you have that, again, being selective about the creators you work with, making sure you're just working with creators who share your values, versus the ones who are just the easiest to work with, or the ones who say yes, or the ones who, I will say the ones who approach you, but the ones who approach you usually are aligned with your values. And sometimes that means making difficult decisions, right? And so saying no to certain creators, and then really not settling when you are working with them. And so it can be, again, this is like, it's almost like a BD department or a sales department. They just want to close deals, right? But your team needs to be a little bit more nuanced than just that.
Yep, and understand, right, that you're dealing with people. These are each specific partnerships and relationships. It's not like a Facebook ad where you could just increase the spend from one day to the next and have it scale up flawlessly. You're obviously in a highly regulated industry. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of challenges in making sure the messaging is right when you're having influencers essentially share whatever offer you have, or just sharing more about the brand and the company?
We're dealing with people's money, right? So is this something that can be pretty? Is this Ariel coming to shut us down, or do we still have time?
Keep going.
All right, don't mind me. And so it's important that, and let's go back to the education side, that as long as the creator is truly understands what we're offering, why we're offering it, we generally don't run into issues. But when sometimes folks take shortcuts, and that could be on our end as well, right? Like if we don't go through that full education process, they'll say something which we have to be very vigilant about because of regulation. Make sure that they're representing us and our offerings all in the right way. Now we're a debit product where we're again, banking. Most of the regulations make sense. There's something called UDAP, which is unfair and deceptive advertising something practices. Most of those regulations make sense. So as an ethical brand, we don't come up against them too often.
And I think it goes to your earlier point about aligning the whole organization around this, right? Because you've aligned your marketing efforts really around influencers, but for that to work, you have to align that mentality. And so from what we've seen, that has to come from not just the engineers and product people, like you mentioned, but also the legal department, and having them understand, here are the ins and outs in dealing with influencers. Here's the process, which might be different than working with a regular vendor or partner. There's a different flow, a different dynamic. Ariel, I don't know if we're getting played off yet or we have a little more time.
You two are the last session, so you can keep going.
Awesome. Just a couple more questions, and we can open up the Q&A if there's any. But you talk about the importance of picking the right influencer, right? Can you like walk us through and walk the audience through like a little bit of like your process for identifying the right influencer? You know, how do you go about finding them? Are you reaching out? Are you waiting for them to come to you? If you just walk us through that dynamic and how you just determine, and what's your criteria for determining if someone's going to be a good fit to represent your brand or not?
Yeah, well, it's it's definitely part art, part science, right? And a lot of subjectivity here. My advice is look to your audience and see where they are. Because for one, it might not be an influencer space at all, right? Or what is an influencer to your audience? I mentioned maybe an athlete for a little bit of an older audience, but it could be podcasts. Podcasts, and podcasters are influencers. And again, in a broader term, creator, however you want to put it. Those may be the best ones to reach your audience, depending on where they are. So if you don't know anything, start with your audience. If you don't know your audience, ask them, and ask them, who they care about. And I would do that in the most open way possible, and that can be a start in terms of like what direction you should go. In terms of actual discovery, I'd say a lot of these social companies have built billion-dollar companies based on really amazing algorithms that can recommend you great content if you like certain content. So it's pretty simple, but that's actually a pretty good way to discover folks is just poking around natively. And then from a brand standpoint, it depends really where you are as a brand. But if you're fairly mature and you know where you are, outlining like pretty firm guidelines, or pretty specific guidelines, I shouldn't say firm, pretty specific guidelines that you can then operate within, so that every decision you're making isn't one that, can be, you have to revisit your core values, right? No, your values are there, they're set, and then you can say, hey, am I operating within these? Do these check these boxes or not? Usually helps.
Awesome. And in terms of ROI and measuring success, I guess, how are you measuring success with influencers? How are you tracking it? What are those KPIs that you look for? And I ask because, influencers can be used as both, as like a direct response sort of channel, but also there's just so much benefit from a branding standpoint, a trust standpoint. And so I think some advertisers sometimes struggle with that sort of dual aspect of it. So can you talk to that a little bit and how you guys are approaching it?
Yeah, well, we care about both here. And I'd say a lot of times within an organization, maybe influencer gets pigeonholed under one, and it's really not about the channel. It's almost like saying, oh, Facebook, is a performance direct response channel that could never be used for branding, or that TV is a branding channel that could never be used for direct response. I think, as a channel, it can be used for both. And in terms of measuring, certainly, measuring direct response is relatively easy, right? And I say relatively because you do the thing and then you see what happens, and you get a level of attribution. Attribution is never going to be as clean or as simple as it is with, let's say a Facebook ad or a Google ad, right? Something with, full view through and click-through tracking and all that. But it's not exactly rocket science to model out either. On the brand side, it's a little bit more difficult, right? You have to, and we pay very close attention to our brand. We measure our brand and our perception and all that pretty rigorously. But it happens on a much longer time horizon. So that one's a little bit more challenging, but one that we're very conscious of.
Awesome. Awesome. And I guess, Ariel, we could open this up to Q&A if there are any questions.
Totally. Do you see any that came through? Let's see.
I do. Oh, let's see. I guess as the moderator, I could see these. Let's see. Okay, here's a great one. How has the customer journey evolved in recent years? How have the changes in the customer journey impacted your approach to digital media?
Well, I spoke about relevance before. A fun one, again, I'll point to what we just did with Mr. Beast because he is so big, right? And we have, essentially we have a long-term partnership with him. It's allowed us to kind of invest more resources into a custom experience. So even in the landing page, right? You can go to MrBeast.com current.com/MrBeast. And it's a custom landing page, right? With custom value props to that. You enter in promo code, or actually we call it a creator code BEAST in the app, and you're getting a custom splash screen that's branded Mr. Beast. When he pays you, you get payment from Mr. Beast. It's a custom page and a custom branded receipt. So the full experience is tailored around this. And in this case, it's an influencer, but right, we tried our best to do this for as many segments as possible, right? So that it's we're one platform, but we've built it in a way that can be really flexible for tons of different people. I mean, we have parents and teens. We have a teen banking product. And it's one platform that can accommodate for both of those. So that's something that's a little bit in our DNA from our early stages to build this to be super flexible. And when you get that flexibility, you can customize it.
I know you spoke about that digital community earlier in the session, and when you go to Current's website, you feel that community. You're like, I'm a millennial, but when I go to that website, I'm like, all of my peeps are on here. I need to join. I need to get on this app. Everyone hype is on it.
Little bit of FOMO, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. There's another question, and on a topic we didn't dive into that I think it's on top of a lot of people's mind, which is around inclusion, right? So how do you see your audience demographic expanding to be more inclusive as the industry grows and evolves?
Yeah, well, our customers are really diverse, right? I talked about how traditional banking set up to serve one type of customer, right? And that's a wealthy customer, somebody who's accumulating assets, and somebody who fits the mold, right? So they're in all likelihood older, in all likelihood working, a professional full-time job with what we call like the nuclear family, because and again I'll allude back to actually our teen banking product, which is pretty interesting. But even that, I think that's the first product that we launched years back. We built it to accommodate divorced parents, right, and co-parenting, for you to both be on one account but still be able to give money to your kid. So kind of, I'd say accommodating for lots of different lifestyles and unique lifestyles has been in our DNA early on. From a diversity standpoint, right, we bank a disproportionate amount of African Americans, a disproportionate amount of people of color. And if you look at the creators we work with, they reflect that. And so all of this is to say, for us, we can do it in a way that's really authentic and true to who we are. So that we're, we're a little bit privileged because it's not as forced as I've seen with other brands. But it's something that, again, our mission is to improve people's financial outcomes, right? And so it's nice to be able to actually do that, right? And have inclusion be part of our core mission.
Such a great closing sentiment to this talk. And I just want to thank you both for coming onto the stage for such an amazing, amazing session. I hope you'll come back soon. Adam, I know we're seeing you later into the summer. So thank you again for closing off with such a great panel.
No, this is great. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to have the platform. Thanks so much for putting it on. And I'd say my plug is current.com/careers. We're hiring very aggressively here in New York. So please don't hesitate to reach out, apply on the site, hit me up on LinkedIn, do whatever. We're growing the team.
Awesome. Adam, we can connect offline about that. We help a lot of our community members grow their teams. So Eric, and thank you to you as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Do
you
you have
guys for organizing this.
Yeah.
Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. You know, I guess I'll plug something. We're hiring as well. You can go to our website, see the job postings. It's very fortunate to be in a growth position coming up the year of a year that 2020 was, and so you know, and if you're curious to learn more about just influencer marketing, any sort of questions, we really, you know, position ourselves as not only thought leaders but just advocates, soundboards, whatever that may be, just good partners all around. So check us out at openinfluence.com. Reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, just Eric Dahan. And yeah, and that's it for me.
Totally. Well, I will follow both of you with Brand Innovators is also hiring. So everyone is hiring across the board. Yes. So thank you. Adam, next time you come onto the stage, I would love to hear about your relationship with Mr. Beast in the early stages. I've heard some awesome stories.
Yeah, it's you know,
so epic. Yeah, we'll save it for next time. All right, have a great day. I am going to close out the summit. Thank you everyone for joining. Hope you had a great time. Please come back tomorrow, May 13th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're hosting a summit around the future of travel, and we'll be joined by marketing leaders from Expedia, Getaway, Marriott,